Galw'r aelodau I drefn. Yr eitem gyntaf prynawn yma yw'r cwestiynau I weinidog yr economi a thrafnidiaeth, ac mae'r cwestiwn cyntaf gan Llyr Gruffydd.
Diolch yn fawr, Llywydd. Pa gynlluniau sydd gan Llywodraeth Cymru I hybu economi trefi gwledig?
Diolch. Improving the availability of quality of work in all parts of Wales is essential to our aim of tackling regional inequalities, and through the Economic Action Plan we are taking action to empower people with the skills required to get the best jobs that they can and to power each of the regions in Wales, including rural communities in those regions.
We've seen, of course, an increase in the number of retailers who've gone into administration. Yeah. I think it's up 6% since 2017. And, of course, we're hearing that it's been quite a tough Christmas for businesses on the high street. Now, we need a major transformation in retail and in the way the high street operates and presents itself, particularly more challenging, I'd imagine, in rural towns than many other places. People won't stop buying. I suppose it's the way that they spend their money that's changing. But how is the government helping those retailers, particularly in rural areas, to respond to those changes and challenges? And what are you doing to support them in that transition so that we can retain at least or even increase the footfall and that we can maybe provide the enhanced shopping experience that some people are looking for?
Well, I think the member raises a very timely question, given that we've just been through the busiest time of the year for the high street. And what is very apparent is that consumer behaviour continues to change, and many experts believe that we are only half the way through the, if you like, the revolution that the high street is facing. Against that backdrop, the Welsh Government is able to assist and is assisting in a number of ways through rates relief, through the creation of business improvement districts, and I believe we are doubling the number of bids with support offered from the Welsh Government for the creation of many more such interventions. But I think what is also important to note is that the retail sector has now been designated priority status by the Welsh Government, and as my colleague, the Deputy Minister, takes forward work on the foundational economy, we'll be looking to test various interventions to support important components of the foundational economy, of course, including the retail sector. What's vitally important is that we also place a renewed focus on quality of place as an attractor for consumers to go into town centres and into the high street. What we've seen in many parts of Wales, parts of the UK and the world where there are vibrant high streets still, is that those high streets are not just based on the retail sector, on the experience of purchasing goods, but on a wider experience, on the experience of interacting with people, on services that are provided often alongside retail services. And so in terms of the regional plans and the place-based economic development programme that we're now taking forward, I believe that the retail sector in Wales has much to look forward to. However, that optimism that I have is set against a universal backdrop of continued consumer behavioural change.
Cwestiwn 2, Rhiannon Pasmo.
Diolch Fawr. What is the Welsh Government doing to support a regional economic development policy to aid communities in Islwyn?
Thank you. As part of the new Economic Action Plan, we've placed particular emphasis on taking a regional approach to developing the Welsh economy. We've established chief regional officers and regional units to make sure we coordinate our work with local partners, and we're working with the OECD to inform our approach to regional investment post-Brexit.
Okay, thank you. The Welsh Government announced as 2019 began that the OECD will lead a new project to support the development of a regional economic development policy for Wales. This new project will see international experts visit Wales and discuss regional economic challenges and opportunities with partners. How can we mitigate for the loss of European Union regional investment? And may I invite these experts and professionals to visit Islwyn to meet with politicians and officers from Caerphilly County Borough Council to explore how the Welsh Government can facilitate the future economic well-being of communities like mine in Islwyn.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sure that the OECD team will be keen to learn lessons from the experience in Caerphilly and in specifically in the Islwyn constituency, so I very much hope that they'd want to meet with the officers there. This will be a 2-year project. The first phase is now underway, and I think it's really important that we have external challenge and scrutiny to the approach that we've been taking, so we constantly iterate it, and I'm very keen that we focus on grounded firms and the foundational economy to see if we can make a tangible difference to the way people feel the local economy works for them. On the member's point on Brexit, then clearly it's important that the campaigners' promise that Wales will be no worse off as a result of Brexit is kept, and we'll be holding them to make sure that in the world after regional funds, if it comes to that, we get no less money than we're getting now.
Mohammed Ashkan.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, you'll be aware that the communities in Islwyn form part of the Cardiff Capital Region Economic Growth Partnership. At their board meeting last November, those members in attendance stated their support for an M4 relief road to be built around Newport. They said that an M4 relief road is critical to support and enable the economic and industrial strategy for growth for South East Wales. Can the Deputy Minister advise when the Welsh Government will be in position to bring this issue before this Assembly?
I think the First Minister has been clear and consistent in the process that's undergoing on the M4. He's still waiting for the legal advice before he can look at the evidence of the public inquiry. He's not yet been presented with the inspector's report, and he'll take that decision in the way that has been set out on a number of occasions.
Cwestiynau nawr gan lefarwyr y pleidie. Llefarydd y Ceidwadwyr Russell George.
Prime Minister, can you outline what plans are in place for the implementation of your economic action plan this year?
Yes, can I thank the member for his question and wish him and all other members a very happy new year. Of course, the Economic Action Plan now has with it regional teams established, chief regional officers. We've got a cross-government delivery board. Regional plans are being put together at the moment. The OECD has been invited to scrutinise and assess the success of the EAP. We've implemented the economic contract and also the Economy Futures Fund. And with the Economy Futures Fund, of course, the calls to action, the lens through which we are now investing in businesses.
Can I thank the Minister for his answer and welcome him back to the post in the new government. Of course, you talked then about the implementation of the plan, but what I want to understand is the detail of that. Certainly at the meeting of the Economy, Infrastructure and Skills Committee in January, members asked you about the delivering of the new Economic Action Plan. And at that meeting, when asked by committee members about the detail of delivering the action plan, you said that discussions were underway between the Welsh Government and relevant stakeholders, and more details would follow in the spring. So I submitted a written question in the spring and asked for progress on the economic contract and the calls for action, of course, two key components of the plan. And in your answer, you said that we have been discussing our approach with businesses and other organisations across Wales. So again, I asked you in a written question just before Christmas, just last month. And in your answer then, you said that your planned measures included refining your approach in 2019 and taking forward work to develop challenge proposals with groups of businesses. So my concern here, Minister, is that there is a talk about plans, but nothing that we can tangibly see. All I hear about is plans. Plans to deliver a plan and then to deliver the next plan. So I will ask, Minister, has the delivery of the action plan stalled? And again, when will we and businesses see progress tangibly on the ground?
No, the member is absolutely right that it's all about implementing a plan. It's not just about designing a plan and publishing a plan, as the UK government has found in its inability to implement a Brexit plan or indeed even get agreement for it. And I am able to confirm to the member that the economic contract is now in place. More than 100 businesses seeking financial support from the Welsh Government have signed the economic contract. In terms of refining the economic action plan, we're looking at how we can firstly extend the principles of the economic contract right across government, including through procurement, but we're also looking at, as I think I've made clear in previous committee appearances, we're looking at how we can consolidate further funds into the Economy Futures Fund. Dozens of awards have been made already through the Economy Futures Fund. I think perhaps one of the highlights of the period between launch of the EAP and implementation has come just this week when we were able to announce support for Tallers to take forward the National Digital Exploitation Centre, which is, of course, an initiative that meets more than one of the calls to action. It focuses largely on the development of skills, it focuses on research and development, and it also focuses on innovation, demonstrating how the Economic Action Plan is already making a big difference as we strive to increase the availability of high-skilled, well-paid work, and as we drive forward the inclusive growth agenda. It's perhaps worth my saying as well that in terms of the challenge opportunities that we're looking at considering soon, I, just before Christmas, shared a platform with the Secretary of State for Bays, Greg Clark, in London at the Royal Society, where we both talked about the importance of place-based economic development and how the Economic Action Plan can dovetail with the UK industrial strategy in a number of ways. And one of the ways that we discussed further collaboration, or one of the avenues that we discussed further collaboration, concerned the UK government's challenges, grand challenges, and the Welsh Government's challenge proposals from business. So I think that a huge amount of work has already taken place in terms of implementing the Economic Action Plan. Through those dozens of awards, through the Economy Futures Fund, many jobs are being created, but most importantly of all, we are now driving a very, very clear inclusive growth agenda through the implementation of the economic contract and through businesses so warmly welcoming it and signing up to that contract.
Well, thank you, Minister, for his delivery. Of course, that is important, rather than just a plan. I know what businesses need, I'm sure you will agree, is clarity to operate effectively, and they're looking to the Welsh Government to provide this. So can I ask, Minister, for what I want to see something specific, something practical that is happening on the ground, and what is going to be delivered over this next 12 months. Businesses want to know that. I think we as members want to know that in order that we can hold you to account and scrutinise you in that regard. But can I ask you to consider setting out a timetable, a month-by-month timetable over this next year, so we can measure the delivery against your economic plan?
Can I point to a number of areas that I think members should take an interest in this year, particularly after we exit the EU, and they concern the awards that we make through the Economy Futures Fund. How many awards are we making to businesses that are seeking to drive inclusive growth and to future-proof themselves and the Welsh economy? The second concerns the economic contract. How many businesses are signing up to the economic contract? And then thirdly, the creation of the regional units. How many members of the civil service are allocated to the CROs? Now, at present, CRO teams are very small. It's my intention, as we drive regional economic growth, that place-based agenda, it's my intention to increase those teams as rapidly as possible so that the change on the ground is very apparent to businesses. What businesses tell me day in, day out, is that there are a large number of advisory services, there's a large number of support services available, but the problem, perhaps, is that there isn't the simplicity and the transparency. And within the ethos of the Be the Spark initiative, we need to ensure that there is greater simplicity, collaboration, consolidation, wherever and whenever possible. And for that reason, we're setting up the regional units, bringing together Welsh Government activities, local government activities on a regional basis, and aligning them with the services offered by Business Wales and the Development Bank of Wales, so that no matter where you are in Wales, you are only one point of contact away from financial support and advisory service and the sort of support that's required in order to future-proof your business in the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
Llywydd Plaid Cymru, Rhina Piollen.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Minister, could you remind us how you define what an anchor company is and how important you think their well-being and long-term sustainability is to the Welsh economy?
Well, the member will be interested to know that I'm carrying out a review of the definition of anchor company status and regionally important companies. There is no doubt that large companies make a huge contribution to the Welsh economy. In 2018, presiding officer, there were 1,675 large enterprises active in Wales, and that represented 0.6% of all active enterprises in Wales, which is well above the equivalent UK figure of 0.1%. And as we've seen with the likes of Aston Martin and Airbus, those companies that are currently considered anchor companies are hugely important in driving growth within their respective supply chains.
Very interested to note the review that will be taking place, and I look forward to hearing the results of that review. Ford, of course, is one anchor company. 1,000 jobs are at risk there, we now understand. Airbus is another. Goodness knows what threats there will be to future investment there in light of Brexit. Will Van Newydd surely would be an anchor in years to come. I'll have a chance to return to that issue with a topical question later on. But how do you reflect on the potential impact of the fact that across Wales anchors seem to be slipping, and is that a driver behind the review that you've called?
Well, anchors aren't slipping necessarily. What's happening with, let's take Airbus as a perfect example. They are becoming far more efficient, and Airbus has approximately 6,000 employees in Broughton. It's about the same that it had 6 years ago, but what's changed between 2013 and 2019 is that the site has become about 40% more efficient. And that has to take place. That sort of efficiency drive has to take place right across all businesses if they're to succeed and strive in the fourth industrial revolution, the age of digitalisation, digitisation, artificial intelligence and automation. Ford is a major concern. And just as I'll be at Airbus tomorrow talking about the consequences and the implications of what's happening at Westminster with business leaders in North Wales and primarily with Airbus, today the First Minister was at Ford discussing the future of the plant. What is very apparent is that the change in the automotive sector is presenting huge challenges for the global automotive industry. And Ford itself is looking at plant closures, line removal at sites in France, potentially Russia, in Germany. Here in Wales, at Ford in Bridgend, as I said yesterday, we have a highly trusted workforce, a very efficient work programme, and a product, the engine, the Dragon engine, which is seen as being at the cutting edge of the internal combustion engine production suite. Now, what's important for the Dragon engine is that it's considered for hybridisation at the Bridgend plant, and we'll be doing all that we can to ensure that that takes place. But it's also important for Ford in Bridgend to capture any increase in demand for the Dragon engine as it is today, because I believe there are only 6 facilities that are able to build that particular engine, and Bridgend is, if not the most efficient, it is certainly one of the most efficient, with an incredibly skilled and loyal workforce. Alongside that, there has been much speculation about the potential of the INEOS investment, and again, the Welsh Government is doing all that it can in order to secure that investment. I hope between the work that I've been able to demonstrate we're doing with Ford, with Airbus, the interventionist approach that we are taking whenever and wherever possible, which last week led to the creation of hundreds of jobs at a new challenger bank, and this week has led to the creation of NDEC. The Welsh Government is certainly not standing still as the world spins, it seems, out of control because of the Brexit dilemma.
Well, what we are seeing, though, through much of what you discussed there, is the vulnerability of even those anchor sectors that we consider to be so important. Now, you'll know I'm not an eggs all in one basket. Let's depend on FDI, bank only on large companies kind of guy. You'll know that we in Plaid Cymru are clear on the need, for example, to refocus on growing our small and medium-sized indigenous enterprises, but there is no escaping the importance of those big players. And this is clearly, as you have agreed through your answers, a very risky time for them. So will you agree to convene a major economic summit now to show that Wales is serious about overcoming current challenges, to show that Welsh Government is serious about overcoming challenges, to discuss the nature of those challenges, plus our needs in terms of infrastructure investment and the needs of our small and medium-sized enterprises, because we cannot afford to face those challenges without showing our mettle as a nation and showing that we are serious about overcoming them.
Yeah, I would not disagree with the member on those points, and I'm pleased to say that over the past 12 or so months I've been engaging with businesses by their respective sectors and on a regional basis, smaller scale summits, if you like, to discuss the impact that Brexit is having and also the longer-term challenges and opportunities that many sectors, in particular FMPS, advanced manufacturing and life sciences face. And the next summit actually will take place in this month, later this month. It will concern marine energy. It will take place in Swansea. So we are keenly pursuing every opportunity to engage with business to identify the threats, challenges and opportunities of the future. In the context, of course, of the situation that we face with Britain leaving the European Union. I think what's really important now, though, is that for all of the work the Welsh Government is doing and can do, the UK Government offers a sort of calm, collective position that a proper government with proper leadership can offer at Westminster. And above all, the uncertainty over Brexit must come to an end.
Cyfarfod UKIP, David Rowlands.
Diolch, Ewen. And can I also congratulate the Minister on being retained in his cabinet position. The First Minister stood in this chamber and proclaimed, the previous First Minister stood in this chamber and proclaimed that unemployment in Wales was below the UK average at 3.8%. However, the latest figure is now running at 4.2%, which is above the UK average. Does the Minister believe that the First Minister was a little premature in his positive assessment of this aspect of the Welsh economy?
No. In all fairness to the former First Minister, he was quoting factually the unemployment statistic at the time. And what is absolutely clear is that Wales now has record low unemployment, record low economic inactivity rates, record high employment rates. And that we are also seeing, it's often assumed that economic activity and employment is confined mostly to the more urbanised areas. But actually, if you look at rural areas, you'll find across Wales, in rural communities, employment rates higher and unemployment rates lower than the Welsh average. In parts of Wales, if you take North Wales, for example, you'll find that not only is the unemployment rate there below the Welsh average and at a historic low level, in fact, the lowest level since records began, the employment rate there is also below the UK average. I think there's a huge success story that should be told about the ability of the Welsh Government to drive down unemployment, and all of the facts, all of the evidence bears that statement out. Since devolution, Wales has had the fourth highest increase in GVA. Unemployment has fallen dramatically. Inactivity rates have fallen dramatically. But what concerns me today, right now, is that set against a backdrop of record high employment and record low unemployment, we still need to ensure that jobs are more secure. We still need to ensure that jobs are better paid. And we still need to ensure that people have higher levels of skills in order to get better quality jobs.
Well, I thank the Minister for that answer. Of course, as with all statistics, the devil is in the detail. For instance, we find that this unemployment statistic includes as employed those on the iniquitous zero-hour contracts. And another factor not addressed are the increase in number of people in our border areas, particularly in South Wales East and the east of North Wales, who, although they live in Wales, are actually working in England, which is not necessarily reciprocated. This would appear again, would you not agree, to further exacerbate the inaccuracy of the stated unemployment figures and therefore, of course, the true state of the Welsh economy?
Well, the figure in the MDA area, that functioning geographical area of North East Wales and Chester and Cheshire West and the Wirral, shows that around about 25,000 people do, as the member says, travel from Wales to England each day to work. And the figure travelling from England to Wales each day is also around 25,000. So actually it balances out very well. And that's why we're keen to ensure that the Flintshire Corridor project goes ahead to make Wales a more attractive place for investment, so that we can win more investment on this side of the border. It's also a huge contributing factor to the improved GVA figures that I've already quoted. But the member raises an incredibly important point about zero-hour contracts and availability of fair work. Well, we wish Wales to become a fair work nation, and in March, the Fair Work Commission will report back with recommendations about how we will how we will meet our vision. Their recommendations will be fully considered in the context of the economic contract contained within the EAP, and it's my intention to be able to adopt those recommendations and implement it in a revised economic contract as soon as possible.
I thank the Minister for that clarification. The latest projections for post-Brexit Britain tell us that the UK will leapfrog France and become the 6th biggest economy in the world, and is likely to remain there for at least a decade. Can the Minister assure us that he and his government will do all that it can to ensure Wales will not miss out on this unique opportunity to exploit this anticipated expansion of the UK economy, so we in Wales will avoid the seriously high unemployment figures currently being experienced across most of Europe?
Well, in order to raise the wealth and also the well-being of the country, we need Wales, we need the UK to become more productive. We also need to be able to compete better on the international stage. And my grave fear is that if we crash out of the European Union with no deal, our economy will shrink by around 10%, our competitiveness will be hammered, our productivity levels could crumble and crash, because it will simply not be as easy as it is now to be able to get skilled labour here at the drop of a hat, or indeed to deploy people from, we talk about Airbus, deploy people from Broughton to Toulouse at a moment's notice. We won't be able to transport goods freely and rapidly. And also this is set against the backdrop of Industry 4.0, which I do believe actually offers us an opportunity to leapfrog other nations. There are precious few opportunities that economies have to excel in a short, rapid period of time. But the Fourth Industrial Revolution, if we capture all of the opportunities, if we embrace it, gives us an opportunity to leapfrog, not just some of the existing strong economies of the world, but also those that are biting on our heels will be able to surge ahead of them. But as I say, it's only if we embrace the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
Question 3, John Griffiths.
Will the Minister make a statement on the role of cities in economic development in Wales?
Yes, our Prosperity for All strategy and the Economic Action Plan sets out actions for all parts of Wales to contribute to and to benefit from economic growth, and this includes enabling our cities to be engines of growth that benefit their wider regions.
Minister, already today, in answering questions, you and the Deputy Minister have spoken about regional development, some of the new organisation for that, and the new drive that you wish to see behind it. Newport, Cardiff and Bristol have been talking and working together for some time in terms of development across that area. The abolition of the tolls on the 7 crossings, I think, give new impetus in terms of the possibility and the potential. And at the same time, we know that there's critical mass across the area in terms of people, businesses, organisations, right across the sectors. So given that potential, given those advantages and the new structures, the new drive that Welsh Government seeks, the role of the OECD, could you tell me how that area of Wales will feature in the early action that you expect to see?
Well, I'm very pleased to answer the member's question. John Griffiths raises an important point about the functional economic area that is Cardiff, Newport and Bristol. And just as we're seeing now closer collaboration on an economic basis, we have for many years experienced collaboration across that border within that area on an academic front with the G4 group of universities, often working very closely together on joint projects. I'm looking forward to the OECD taking a close view of the Economic Action Plan and regional development in Wales. The OECD will directly inform the regional approach, and it will ensure that we've got the right structures and governance in place in order to create and maintain cross-border links. The other important point to make, I think, is that as we move forward with regionalisation on economic development, I think that it will enable the regions to be able to collaborate on a cross-border basis on their own terms, and this is very important in the context of a post-Brexit Britain, because if we've learned anything, it's we have to ensure that communities, local areas and regions feel empowered to do what they can for their own people and for themselves, and they do not see central government and a centralist approach as doing things for and to people. It enables a greater degree of co-production and collaboration. I think whether it's in the southeast or whether it's in the northeast or whether it's between the northwest and Ireland, we have to encourage cross-border activity and collaboration if we are to become a more competitive nation.
David Melding.
Minister, I hope you and your very promising deputy have had a chance to read the Conservative Group's strategy on livable cities. Indeed, if you and your wider team want us to run a seminar for you, we'd be delighted to inform you of our thoughts. I think one thing that we were struck by is that some cities around the UK have really been key for economic development in their regions and nations. Sheffield, Manchester, Birmingham and Edinburgh clearly have had this at the heart of their development. And I think now with the Cardiff and Swansea City deals, there's a real chance that we can start to think this way, that our cities have to do more than just what they do for their immediate populations. They belong to the regions and, in fact, the whole nation of Wales. And in driving greater economic ambition, they really have a role that cannot be played by any other sort of economic actor at the moment. And we must see them as a great resource, and they've all got great potential as well.
Well, I'd agree very much with David Melding. His assessment is absolutely right. I'd also add that alongside cities, the importance of satellite towns cannot be understated. It's absolutely vital that just as we support cities in developing strong identities, it's also important that we encourage satellite towns to better link with the cities that they are dependent on, but also to ensure that they carve out distinct identities, not just for the people that they serve, but also for the businesses that operate there. I've been struck often by the success of, and I know the member mentioned a number of cities, I've been struck by the success of Manchester in this regard, the way that the centre of Manchester has grown so rapidly since the 1980s, based on a number of factors, but at the same time, satellite areas and satellite towns around Manchester and the Greater Manchester region have also begun to thrive without losing their own distinct identities. And so I see the development of cities as being very significant indeed, but I also see cities as serving the growth and the development of the satellite towns and rural areas in the hinterland that are so dependent on the growth that often takes place at a faster rate within the centre of cities.
Cwestiwn 4, David Rees.
What discussions has the Minister had with local authorities regarding the improvement of local bus services in the Avon Valley?
Well, we work very closely with local authorities right across Wales on a number of fronts to further improve local bus services, and we continue to provide substantial funding to enable them to provide local bus services.
Well, thank you for that answer, Minister. The Avon Valley is actually serviced by 2 local authorities in one sense, because buses come from my state and Bridgend. Their focus mainly is from Talbot up to the Avon Valley. Now, the communities in the Avon Valley are some of the most disadvantaged communities we have in Wales, and they don't have a lot of cars. The percentage of car ownership is quite low in comparison to many other areas. They rely upon bus services. Now, unfortunately, the bus services from Talbot up to the Avon Valley, 1 hour goes to Glencorrwg, the second hour it goes to Blaengwynfi and alternates. So for 2 hours, you have to wait for a bus to come up. Now, for people who haven't got transport and who have to access services, whether it's employment or maybe elder people who need to go to hospital services, 10 miles down the road to Neath Talbot Hospital, they may spend all day travelling and getting there to get back in for maybe half-an-hour appointment. Now, these are challenging times. I've written to the bus company, who seem to focus mainly on commercial activities. But will you therefore meet with the Talbot Council and Bridgend County Borough Council to look at the opportunities to support bus transportation to allow people to actually get to places on time without spending their whole life travelling?
Well, I'd be more than happy to meet with the local authorities. In fact, the example that David Rees has highlighted today shows the potential benefits of creating joint transport authorities on a regional basis so that local authorities can plan and deliver bus services together in a collaborative way. I think David also highlights a fundamental flaw in current arrangements, which is that neither the Welsh Government nor local authorities have the powers to require a bus company to run a particular service. That's achieved through local authority contracts, including a public subsidy. Now, we've been able to maintain the bus services support grant at £25 million for some time. And this money is used to supplement, I should stress, supplement local authority budgets for this purpose. It does not exist to replace local authority budgets. And I do think that it's essential that local authorities continue to demonstrate their commitment to local connectivity by maintaining their own budgets for subsidising bus and community transport services. But this fundamental flaw in the system cannot and will be addressed on a sustainable way by having local government and Welsh Government continuing to subsidise non-commercial routes. What we need is radical reform, and I've recently outlined through the White Paper the proposals that the Welsh Government has for addressing the dire consequences of deregulation and the decisions made in the mid-1980s for bus services. And through the reforms that we are proposing, I seek to ensure that bus services across the length and breadth of Wales serve the needs of passengers and citizens, rather than serve the desire of some to profit from this incredibly valuable and necessary service in many of our communities. And Llywydd, I would encourage all members to take a keen interest in the White Paper and to submit observations and views before the consultation ends in mid-March.
Susie Davies.
Llywydd, well, of course, both the councils that David Rees mentioned are in different city regions, which are taking very different approaches to their future transport needs. So how that progresses will be very interesting. But in the short term, in March 2008, you confirmed that you'd issued guidance to local authorities to commit no less than 5% of their bus budget to community transport. And, of course, community transport, if it follows the regulations properly, can pick up some non-commercial routes. It's a year on now. Are you confident that councils are following that guidance?
I am not yet confident that the guidance is being fully followed by all, and the extent of local authorities' commitment to maintain their own budgets for bus subsidies will therefore increasingly be reflected in my decisions about each authority's bus services support grant allocations. The reason being is that I want to make sure that we use taxpayers' money that comes to Welsh Government to incentivise enhanced services in our communities, and we will only do that within the current arrangements on the short-term basis by ensuring that local authorities contribute to the bus services support grant funding. Longer term, of course, through the reforms, as we use more of the tools that are currently available, but as we develop more tools and levers, I think we will be able to deploy a service across Wales that is not just more effective for meeting passenger needs, but one that is also more sustainable in terms of costs.
Syed.
My view is the system is currently broken. We have a perverse situation where councils are cutting key services like libraries and community centres in the Avon Valley, with 4 more proposed for Neath Talbot ongoing, expecting people from the Avon Valley then to travel further to get to those services, but then they can't get to those services because the buses are simply not there. You mentioned the White Paper. What within that White Paper, because a lot of people may not read that, but what are the headlines from that, so that people in our area can be assured that when those changes come about, either through changing the law, whether it's a not-for-profit company like Transport for Wales that takes over the regulation, that they will have more frequent buses in their valley communities so that they can continue to live there and that they don't become ghost towns with people moving away from those areas because the services are simply not there anymore.
Well, I think the member makes a really important point. The system is broken, and that's why the reforms that we've outlined in the White Paper are so necessary. In brief, and again, I would invite all members to read the White Paper and to submit observations. The proposals include franchising powers. They include the power to be able to create municipal bus companies. They include proposals for greater integration of different forms of transport. They include the creation of joint transport authorities to deliver and plan bus services on a regional basis. And they include proposals for Transport for Wales to take a more active role in delivering this vital service for the people of Wales. Alongside this, there are potential changes that can be made in terms of the fare regime for passengers to make it more affordable and more transparent as well, to integrate tickets. It's still a shocking fact that in some parts of Wales, 20% of unemployed young people can't afford or can't get a bus service to their interviews, never mind to jobs. They are locked out of employment because the system is broken. And that's why I believe that the proposals in the White Paper, that's why I believe that radical reform is so vital.
Question 5, Hefin David.
How does the Welsh Government intend to develop relationships with large companies based in Wales?
Thank you. The Economic Action Plan sets out how we'll build a something-for-something relationship with businesses of all sizes based upon businesses sharing our values by contributing to a social cause. We're going to do this through the economic contract, through the calls to action and through the Economy Futures Fund. And of course, that social cause is to drive inclusive growth with fair work for all.
I was interested also in his answer earlier when he talked about the discussion about what we mean by anchor companies. That's an interesting development. Last week I met with Admiral Group, Wales' only FTSE 100 listed company, and they employ a substantial number of constituents in Caerphilly and nearly 8,000 staff across 3 sites in Wales. We discussed how that company had strategic links with the Welsh Government, and from my perspective through the discussion, those strategic links seem to be fairly limited. One of the key things that a government can help develop and grow is skills, particularly the skill needs of that organisation. They discussed some of their skill requirements and the fact that they've got the Admiral Academy, which looks at professional and personal development of staff. I don't feel that there's enough of a strategic link between that and our education sector in Wales. With bearing in mind the government's cross-portfolio approach to strategy, would the Minister commit to having high-level discussions with Admiral to explore how those strategic skill development links can be developed by the government?
Can I thank Hefin David for his question, and furthermore thank him for the keen interest that he's taken over many years in the skills system that we operate. I met the founder of Admiral just last autumn. We discussed, amongst many other issues, the availability of people with the right skills for the company. And I'd certainly meet with key stakeholders within the financial and professional services more widely in Cardiff. Of course, the member is aware that the RSP, the Regional Skills Partnership for the Cardiff Capital region, has designated the financial and professional services sector as one of its priority sectors for the region as it seeks to better plan skills provision for the economy of the region and ensure that there is a closer alignment between what businesses require and what skills providers and training providers actually produce. Wales's larger employers, such as Admiral, are also allocated a dedicated senior skills relationship manager who work very closely with them on their skills needs, and they also support businesses in facilitating productive engagement with the provider network, including further education colleges and higher education institutions. But I think, given that the RSPs are still in their infancy, there is still work to be done in ensuring that the fusing of business interests and the provision of skilled individuals is enhanced.
Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. Minister, my region depends on Tata, Ford and Sony, which are all major employers and a vital part of the supply chain. My region cannot afford to lose any more jobs. In recent years, all these major employers have scaled back their operations, leading to large job losses. This is a particularly worrying time for workers at the Bridgend Ford plant. And as with Tata and Sony, the key to securing the plant's future lies in securing new and diverse business. Minister, when we spoke last year about the future of the Bridgend plant, I urged you to work with Ford to explore the move to an all-electric drivetrain being produced at Bridgend. Can you outline what progress, if any, has been made on this and whether Ford Europe are even receptive to such a move? If so, what assistance will the Welsh Government give the plant to enable retooling to take place?
Well, we stand ready to support Ford in any way that we can. The First Minister was at the Bridgend site just this morning, meeting with site managers and also with trade union representatives. I said yesterday and I said earlier today that what could be critically important to the Bridgend site is the development of hybridised engines, including a hybrid Dragon engine. And Welsh Government stands ready to assist in any way that it can in ensuring that the Bridgend facility is a chosen facility for the hybridisation of the Dragon engine. Within the forward work cycle, programme cycle for Ford, there are no obvious new engine products being developed, and we must await the outcome of talks with Volkswagen to determine whether Ford will utilise electric drivetrains from the German manufacturer. However, it is my intention to continue working closely with Ford and with social partners at the Bridgend to ensure that the Dragon engine goes on being a success, that any additional demand for the Dragon engine is, results in increased capacity and therefore increased job opportunities at Bridgend. And also that whilst this work is ongoing, we also seek every other opportunity to create employment, either through or potentially both through hybridisation of the Dragon engine and through securing the INEOS investment.
Cwestiwn 6, Mark Isherwood.
How is the Welsh Government aiming to improve transport infrastructure in North Wales?
I'm pleased to be able to refer to my statement of the 21st of November 2018 on transport infrastructure in North Wales.
Thank you. Well, a few days later, on the 27th of November, I called for a Welsh Government statement on rail services in North Wales after a weekend of delayed and cancelled rail services in North Wales, where I've been reliably informed by rail insiders that a shortage of tooling, spares and access to wheel lathes being in place and ensured they were put in place by the incumbent operator had caused that, although there was now access to wheel lathes in Crewe, Bristol and Taunton. How do you therefore respond, given the subsequent apology and assurances from Transport for Wales, to the email I received at the end of December, 5 weeks almost later, that there have been no trains on that particular day on the line from Shotton to Wrexham, that there will be none tomorrow, Monday reverts to a train every 2 hours like it had been for several weeks. They were told there were no trains on Thursday either, that they're peddling Storm Callum as part of the excuse, but that was 6 weeks ago, and how is it that other train operators are not affected by all the wheel set damage which has occurred in Wales? Given the original assurances we had from yourself and Transport for Wales, why was that still happening 5 weeks later?
Well, largely because for far too many years we've seen in Wales a complete lack of investment by the UK government in our rail infrastructure, particularly on our train lines, which remain a responsibility of Network Rail and therefore the Department for Transport. And as I've said on many occasions now, this major problem can be largely attributed to the lack of wheeled slide protection. Why? Well, because the contract that Arriva Train Wales was awarded was simply not fit for purpose. It did not incentivise them to invest in such technology, nor did it compel them when Welsh Government wished for such protection technology to be installed on trains. I was pleased that the first service to return to full and normal operation was one of the North Wales services. And the member points to an industry insider who gave him intelligence on the lack of wheel lathes in Wales. Well, it's true that when you have huge demand for wheel lathes, if you can't meet that demand with what you've got in your own country, you go elsewhere. Llywydd, I'm pleased to say that we did just that, and we were able to identify additional wheel lathes outside of Wales, and that's why we got so many trains back into full use so quickly.
Sir Griffith.
Diolch, Llywydd. Fe allwn ni gyd, dwi'n siŵr, groesawu'r ffaith bod yna fuddsoddiad yn mynd i fod mewn gorsafoedd yng nghyd-destun yr rheilffordd yng Nghymru. Ond dwi'n gwybod os ydy'r gweinidog yn ymwybodol, ond mae Network Rail wedi bod yn gweithio'n agos gyda sefydliadau sydd yn gweithio i drio atal hunanladdiadau. Mi oedd 237 hunanladdiad ar yr rheilffyrdd ym Mhryden yn 2016, 4,5% o holl hunanladdiadau Pryden. Nawr, mae ymchwil yn dangos bod pobl sydd yn ystyried hunanladdiad mewn gorsaf dren yn dilyn patrwm ymddygiad tebyg, ac mae modd defnyddio goleadau meincio sy'n gwynebu oddi ar neu oddi wrth y traciau, barriers ychwanegol, llinellau penodol ar y platfform ac yn y blaen. Mae modd defnyddio'r rhain er mwyn trio taclo y tueddiadau yma tuag at hunanladdiad mewn gorsafoedd tren. Felly, wrth i ni edrych i fuddsoddi yn y gwelliannau yma yn y gorsafoedd, ni allwch chi roi sicrwydd y byddwch chi yn gweithio'n agos gyda y dull yna o daclo hunanladdiadau er mwyn sicrhau bod y buddsoddiad yn cael y bydd gorau posib.
Llywydd, I think this is an excellent question. Look, I think it's a really important point. What I'm going to do is ask Transport for Wales, as it analyses and assesses how to spend the £200 million on all stations across the Wales and Borders network. I'll ask them to put together, at speed, a suicide prevention plan together with Network Rail, so that we can take on the sort of ideas that the member has suggested and introduce them to as many stations as possible.
Diolch i'r gweinidog. Cwestiynau nesaf felly yw'r rhai i'r Cwnsler Cyffredinol a'r gweinidog Brexit, ac mae'r cwestiwn cyntaf gan Lly'r Griffith.
Diolch yn fawr. Llywydd, pa asesiad yma Llywodraeth Cymru wedi wneud o effaith unrhyw fath o Brexit ar economi Gogledd-ddwyrain Cymru?
Bydd gadael yr Undeb Ewropeaidd yn niweidio'r economi. Mae methiant y Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig i gael y Senedd i gymeradwyo'i cytundeb yn creu risg o ddiffyg cytundeb. Rhaid i brif weinidog y Deyrnas Unedig yn rwymo i negodi y madawiad yn Undeb Ewropeaidd yn y ffordd sydd wedi hamlinellu yn diogelu dyfodol Cymru, sef y ffurf leiaf niweidiol o Brexit o hyd.
Diolch yn fawr. Yn 2016 oedd allforion siroedd Fflint ar Exam yn gyfwerth â 5 biliwn o bunnau, ac roedd 87% o'r rheini yn cael ei allforio i'r Undeb Ewropeaidd. Nawr, ydych chi'n cytuno mae'r ffordd gorau o gynnal y lefel yna o allforion a'r holl swyddi a'r manteision economaidd sy'n dod gyda hynny yw i aros yn yr Undeb Ewropeaidd, ac os i chi, beth mae'ch Llywodraeth chi'n neud i sicrhau bod hynny'n digwydd?
Wel, mae allforion, wrth gwrs, yn bwysig iawn i economi'r Gogledd-ddwyrain economi Cymru yn gyffredinol, ac ar y cyfan, wrth gwrs, fel mae'r aelod yn cydnabod yn ei gwestiwn, mae canran o'r allforion yn uwch o Gymru na rhan eraill o'r Deyrnas Unedig i Ewrop. Y ffordd orau bosib o sicrhau ffaniant allforion yn dyfodol yw'r berthynas agosaf phosib gyda'r farchnad sengl. Y math o beth ni ddim wedi gweld yn datganiad gwleidyddol gan y prif weinidog yn San Steffan, a wy'n gobeithio bod y cyfle dros y diwrnodau nesaf, mae'r prif weinidog yno wedi dweud bod hi'n barod i drafod gyda phleidiau eraill. Mae'n bwysig bod y trafodaethau hynny'n cynnwys y posibilrwydd o undeb dollau a pherthynas agosach gyda'r farchnad sengl.
Mark Isherwood.
Diolch, Clive. Well, on a positive note, clearly we have an Airbus in North East Wales, which has made its own concerns known. If we don't have a transition deal, perhaps those who voted against the Prime Minister's deal should consider the risks that they have added of that not happening. However, on a positive note, and despite potential outcomes in this context, the UK defence and aerospace industry recorded a £10 billion increase in deals over the last 12 months, with the total deals valued at £31 billion. And last month, Airbus welcomed the announcement of the aerospace sector deal, providing, they said, a firm commitment to the UK's investment in research and design, an inclusive productive aerospace sector, and one that embraces the technology of tomorrow, including a commitment to £125 million of funding to be matched by Airbus and industry. Are you able to tell us, notwithstanding that this might stretch beyond your brief, what discussions you've had with your colleagues in Welsh Government over what their role might be or already is in developing the aerospace sector deal with the UK Government, Airbus and other aerospace sector companies in Wales?
There is work going on in relation to that. I should just say that the Minister for Economy and Transport has held round tables with large employers in North East Wales over the course of the last year, including Airbus. And we all know, of course, as the member indicated in his question, that Airbus was one of the companies who was very clear about its position if we were to leave the European Union without a transition deal. I take issue with the premise of the member's question. It isn't the case that the only alternative to the Prime Minister's deal is no deal, which we believe would be very, very bad news indeed for Wales. The opportunity now exists for the Prime Minister to reach out across the House of Commons and seek to negotiate a deal with other parties which reflects the principles which set out in securing Wales's future and which this Assembly have endorsed most recently in early December.
Can I start by thanking the member Claire Griffith for North Wales for recognising the importance of the North East Wales economy. I was very pleased last Friday to welcome the First Minister of Wales and our new Minister for North Wales to Allen and Deeside and just over the constituency border in Delyn, where we had an opportunity to discuss Brexit in a Brexit business conference with over 150 business delegates in attendance, including the likes of Airbus. Now, the messages from that conference were pretty clear that there's still need for clarity and cross-party cooperation, and I think this is even more important now following the UK Government's disastrous defeat in the House of Commons yesterday. Counsellor-General, would you be willing to meet with me to discuss further the findings from the Brexit conference and also to give you an insight of the business voice in North East Wales to help you with your organisation and planning of the Welsh Government's response to Brexit?
Thank you for that question. I was aware of the event on Friday, the 11th of January, the First Minister attended and also the Minister for the Economy. And I noted that it was a very interesting discussion and a good opportunity to hear at first hand the sort of anxieties which employers large and small are feeling in North East Wales. I know the work that the member himself is doing in his own constituency in relation to understanding the concerns that local businesses have in relation to Brexit, and I'd be very happy to meet with him to discuss that further.
Cwestiwn 2, Adam Price.
Pa drafodaethau mae'r Cwnsel Cyffredinol wedi cael gyda Llywodraeth Iwerddon ynglŷn â Brexit?
Mae Gwynedogion Cymru wedi trafod materion yn ymwneud â Brexit gyda Llywodraeth Iwerddon, a hynny'n bennaf trwy Cyngor Prydeinig Gwyddelig a fynychais i ar y 9 o Dachwedd 2018. Rwy hefyd wedi cysylltu am gweinidog cyfatebol yn Llywodraeth Iwerddon i gychwyn rhagor o ddeialog ac i adeiladu'r cysylltiadau agos sy'n bodoli'n barod.
Wy'n ddiolchgar i'r Cwnsel Cyffredinol am yr ateb yna ac gai annog i barhau i ymgysylltu gyda Llywodraeth Iwerddon fel soniais i o ni ac yr un abiorwedd wedi medru cwrdd â gwleidyddion ar draws y spectrwm y gwleidyddol yn weriniaeth wythnos diwetha gan gynnwys Helen McEntee, gweinidog Brexit. Gai ofyn iddo fe, a nes i cyffwrdd hwn ddoi, ynglŷn ag erthygl 50 a'r alwad gan Llywodraeth Cymru a Llywodraeth yr Alban, wrth gwrs, i Llywodraeth Prydain i ymestyn erthygl 50. Gai ofyn a fydde fe yn fodlon cyflwyno'r neges yna hefyd i Weriniaeth Iwerddon, wrth gwrs gan bod angen cael cydsyniad yr holl aelod llywodraethau yn yr Undeb Ewropeaidd pe mae'r cais yna yn dod gan Lywodraeth Prydain fel i ni eisiau. Ac ar fater ehangach a pe bai Brexit dal yn digwydd, pa waith sydd wedi cael ei wneud enghraifft i edrych ar gynllun interreg neu rhywbeth cyfatebol i'r dyfodol, fel sy'n bosib wrth gwrs yn achos Norwy a Sweden hyd yn oed yn cynnwys gwledydd sy'n tu fas i'r Undeb Ewropeaidd.
Diolch i'r aelod am y cwestiwn hwn.Wn i erthygl 50, ni'n cymryd pob cyfle wrth gwrs i sicrhau bod Llywodraethau yn deall yn safbwynt ni ynglŷd â hynny.Wn ni galw mwy o ddiweddar ar prif wedi'u yn San Steffan i sicrhau estyniad o hynny ganiatáu i'r trafodaethau ymhelaethu. O ran y berthynas gydweithredol rhwng Cymru a'r Iwerddon, mae'r aelod yn sôn am interreg. Mae gyda ni wrth gwrs berthynas agos gyda yr Iwerddon trwy hynny a trwy'r cynlluniau cydweithredu cyffredinol. Mae'r cynllun cyfredol yn bwysleisio gwaith o ran newid hinsawdd a diwylliant ag ati. Mae'r pethau'n bwysig iawn o ran cryfhau'r berthynas, sicrhau cyfleoedd economaidd yma i ni. Ni eisiau sicrhau bod y cydweithio hynny yn parhau hyd yn oed ar ôl Brexit ac yn ymestyn tu hwnt i'r cynlluniau cyfredol os yw hynny yn bosib, a ni'n sicr yn ein barn bod gyda ni brofiad lwyr i gryfhau'r berthynas rhwng Cymru a'r Iwerddon.
Mark Reckless.
The Welsh Government launched its Brexit website for business in September 2018, and you said in your statement yesterday you hope to have a further portal up and running within a few days. The Irish Government launched its prepareforbrexit.com website in June 2016, within a week of the referendum, and has been offering grants of up to €5,000 to help SMEs prepare for Brexit since the first quarter of 2017. Is there anything Welsh Government could learn from the Irish Government with respect to timeliness in this area?
Well, we've waited for 2 years to hear what the UK Government's view is on the basis upon which we should leave the European Union. 2 years. 2 years ago, this government, together with Plaid Cymru, launched a paper which set out with a very clear evidence base the kind of relationship Wales should have with the European Union after Brexit. We were able to do that 2 years ago, working together, and we've followed that up with a range of policy positions which are evidenced and substantive and which have been persuasive. And the question is why the UK Government wasn't able to do the same. On the point of timeliness, we, as I have said in the Chamber, have an online resource which we plan to launch in the next few days, and that will, I hope, give the people of Wales a clear understanding of what the Welsh Government is doing in terms of preparedness.
David Rees.
Councillor General, I'm pleased to hear that you are having meetings or arranging meetings with your Irish counterparts and discuss it, because if we have a no-deal situation, or even the deal and the backstop kicks in, there will be a form of border down the Irish Sea, and we need to address that. But can I ask you also to meet with counterparts, I know we haven't got a counterpart, but equivalents in Northern Ireland? Because when I went across to speak to the parties in Northern Ireland, it was quite clear a lot of businesses use the ports of Irish Republic to actually access Europe through the Welsh ports. As such, there's going to be a huge challenge to that situation, whether they travel down through Dublin and into Holyhead, or whether they go across into Scotland. It is important, therefore, we address the issues for them as well, to ensure that if there's a boundary in the Irish Sea, they didn't end up having to cross two boundaries to get to Northern Ireland, and it impacts upon Welsh ports.
Thank the member for that question. One of the points which requires clarification in the UK Government's proposals is its reference to checks being undertaken in the least intrusive possible way. That needs to be understood better. But the issue of the backstop, of course, if the sorts of proposals were adopted, which we have been advocating here, would not arise. And whilst the backstop is an absolutely legitimate concern for the EU and the UK Government to ensure that there isn't a hard border on the island of Ireland, the best possible scenario is that that isn't required at all, because we have a set of arrangements which encompass a customs union between the UK and the EU.
Cwestiwn yn nawr gan Llyfarwyr y Pleidiau, Llyfarydd Plaid Cymru, Adam Price.
Diolch, Llywydd. My party will be supporting the vote of no confidence tonight in Westminster. Indeed, we are signatories of the motion that will be voted on in a few hours' time. But I think it's widely accepted that the motion is unlikely to succeed. Given your government's stated support either for a general election or a public vote as a means of breaking the parliamentary logjam, if the vote, as expected, fails tonight, does the government then intend to make a statement tomorrow or in the days following supporting a public vote as the only remaining means of ending the political impasse?
Well, as the member says, there's a vote, a motion of no confidence before the House of Commons today. I have read the same speculation as he has in relation to whether that will succeed or fail. I should say that it would be extraordinary for a UK government to fail to get its principal policy adopted and supported in the House of Commons and then continue in government. That would be, it would be pretty much unprecedented in recent times, certainly. And I think in those circumstances we should not yield the position that the government should lose the confidence of the House of Commons in today's debate. I certainly hope that the motion will prevail. On the broader point, our policy has been, as he is aware and continues to be, that the objective of the Prime Minister ought to be to bring before the House of Commons a deal reflecting the principles which we have in Securing Wales' Future set out, And if that is not possible, and if a general election is not possible either, then in those circumstances, the people may have the final say as a means of resolving that situation.
Yeah, I can understand generally why ministers at a dispatch box don't want to be tempted into speculation of hypotheticals. But I mean, this is a binary in relation to a vote that's only a few hours away in the broader context of a ticking clock. Down to, what is it, 73 days. And so I think the Minister will understand why, we do need clarity as to what the Welsh Government is going to do in response to the almost certain result later this evening. Now, it's plain that, in the unfolding Brexit crisis, we're running out of time. Mrs May's tactic has been to delay a decision for as long as possible, try and force a choice between her deal and no deal, and that tactic indeed failed last night. The key question now is whether Jeremy Corbyn is following the same tactic in trying to avoid what for him is, of course, the thorny issue of people's vote. So can the Council General at least confirm that you would not support the idea that is being floated in some circles of multiple votes of no confidence being brought in the next few weeks, which could, of course, take us perilously close to March the 29th with no hope of resolution?
Well, I'll try again and outline our position. We have called on the Prime Minister to reach out across the House of Commons to seek to find a basis on which a better deal could be agreed. She has said yesterday that she intends to do that. She should do that and include the opposition front benches in doing so. She should drop the red lines, which she has insisted on, fruitlessly in many cases, for the last 2 years. And she should recognise that what is required is a fundamental rewrite of the political declaration, not a question of tinkering at the margins. If that fails, and if a general election is not achievable, then in those circumstances we have always said that a public vote is the best means of resolving that. But that requires us to give space for that discussion to take place, and we will hold the Prime Minister to her word on that being a meaningful discussion.
The UK government has already said, following last night's vote, that it remains a red line for them, that they will refuse to accept a customs union. So effectively, they're ruling out the kind of policy outlined in securing Wales' future. And this is why, isn't it, that generally the consensus view emerging in your party now as well, we've seen the MPs, the 9 Welsh Labour MPs that have come out unequivocally in favour of people's vote, is that is the only means available to us of breaking the logjam and indeed ending the cataclysm of a no deal. I mean, your cabinet colleague Vaughan Gethin has said the time for indecision is long past. We must act now on a people's vote. Minister for International Affairs, Eluned Morgan, has made a similar commitment. Even the First Minister has said, I support a further referendum if all else fails. So when the no confidence vote fails tonight, what else is left to fail? When will we know that it's failed? And do you accept, if the Welsh Government doesn't act quickly, clearly, decisively in response to tonight's vote, it's you that will be judged to have failed the people of Wales?
Well, the timetable for understanding what the possible alternative deals is, it remains unclear at this point. I have said, I think twice now in response to the members' questions, that a public vote, giving the public a final say on this, may well be the means of resolving this, and we would support that as a final say. But having called for these discussions to take place, the Prime Minister having taken up that challenge, we must first allow that discussion to unfold. We are clear about the kind of deal which we think should emerge from that. If she is saying that she still has some red lines, she was being urged, certainly by the leading politicians in her party, not to stick with the strategy which has failed her for 2 years.
Llefarydd y Ceidwadwyr Darren Miller.
Can you tell us what preparations the Welsh Government has taken to promote international trade with Wales post-Brexit?
Indeed, the First Minister, in making his new cabinet, has included a new portfolio in relation to international relations generally, and a part of that portfolio relates to developing the relationships between Wales and the rest of the world, and enhancing even further the work we do in relation to making Wales attractive as a trading destination.
I was delighted to see the new First Minister install a new Minister for International Relations, following the calls from the Welsh Conservatives over a number of years. And I wonder whether you can tell us, in your capacity as Brexit Minister, what work will now be done to develop a network of trade envoys around the world in order to promote opportunities to trade with Wales. We know that the Welsh Government, quite rightly, has worked hard on developing links with North America in recent years, and that there have been a number of trade missions. But there's nothing like having people on the ground all year round in many of the Commonwealth countries, for example, or some of the emerging markets that we would have the opportunity to develop links with. So will you also take another leaf out of our book and appoint a network of trade envoys embedded within British embassies around the world to make sure that the distinctive voice of Welsh business is being heard?
There's already a network of presence in key territories around the world. That has been in place for some time. That's obviously been strengthened latterly. We think very clearly that the best future trading relationships for Wales are those which are derived from full participation in and alignment and membership of a customs union with the European Union. But we are very keen to ensure that we take every possible opportunity to advance the cause of Wales internationally in relation to our, the destination for investment and trading opportunities for our businesses here in exporting in circumstances which, if we end up being outside the European Union, will be significantly more difficult for them.
Well, we are, or I hope we will, be outside the European Union, because that's what the people of Wales absolutely voted for. But do you agree with me that it is a matter of concern that our trade with countries like India and Japan has been falling in recent years? And will you welcome the decision of the Japanese government, as a result of the work of the British government in relation to beef and lamb exports, which now opens up opportunities for Welsh farmers to be able to sell their beef and lamb to the Japanese market of 127 million people? And would you agree with me that there are opportunities for trade envoys, if they are embedded within British embassies, to make sure that this sort of success can be repeated and that further opportunities can come for Welsh businesses as a result?
Well, we obviously always welcome additional export markets for Welsh produce, and so that is to be welcomed. I note that the export sums which have been described in the announcement are significant, but I'm also bound to say that consumers in Japan are going to have to eat an awful lot of lamb and beef to make up for the market restrictions to the market which we would suffer as a consequence of Brexit.
Llywydd Neil Hamilton.
Instead of still arguing over the different ways in which the Brexit referendum result can be betrayed and reversed, isn't now the time to think practically about the way forward and to revert to the offer which Donald Tusk made to Theresa May some time ago to embark upon discussions to bring about a Canada-style free trade agreement, which would have the advantage of delivering on the referendum result? The people of the United Kingdom and the people of Wales both voted to leave unequivocally 2.5 years ago, and would also maximise the opportunities for trade with the EU that nobody wants to sacrifice on either side of the English Channel.
Well, I had the opportunity of meeting, whilst I was a member of the Economy Committee, I had an opportunity to meet with the Canadian delegation to the European Union and heard from them at first hand the experience they had in negotiating the CETA deal with the European Union, which has been described by many as essentially a walk in the park, but they will describe to you as a very, very long and painstaking project. And so I think the notion that we are going to be able to replicate that sort of deal with the European Union is, I think, a fantasy. We have been very clear about the better relationship that we think, the relationship we think which Wales would benefit from post-Brexit with the European Union. That is set out in Securing Wales's Future. It remains our position, and I think even on the government's own figures, the flexibility which they describe from additional capacity to enter into free trade agreements internationally is completely dwarfed by the economic damage which losing out on the existing trading relationships that we have between the EU and the rest of the world would represent.
Well, I'm afraid because the Council General is back to me at the end, I didn't catch exactly what he said. But Canada, of course, started from a very different position from the United Kingdom. We have been a member of the EU for the last 40-odd years, and we have complete regulatory alignment with them, because obviously we have the same code of law and regulation. There should be no difficulty in reaching should be no difficulty in reaching a free trade agreement with the EU. But in any event, would the Council General agree with me that Article 24 of the GATT Treaty, which is now the World Trade Organization Treaty, enables us, once we've entered into negotiations with the EU, in the short term, it will enable us to continue to trade with the EU on zero tariffs whilst negotiating the Canada-style deal?
I'm not entirely sure I understand what the member's position was. I had thought that he had spent the referendum campaign arguing for maximum flexibility and not having to be subject to regulatory alignment with the European Union, and he now seems to be advocating that as a positive benefit.
No, not at all, of course not. All I'm saying is that we wouldn't experience in the negotiation the difficulties which he alluded to as alleged by the Canadians to whom he spoke a little while ago. We don't have to negotiate from a position where we have no agreements with the EU at all. We are actually part of it. So it should be much more simple for us to enter into a longer-term agreement, not least because we have a £67 billion a year trade deficit with the EU at the moment. It's as much in their interest to trade with us as freely as possible as it is for us to trade with them. True, the European Commission has different interests from the people and businesses of Europe because they're engaged in their massive political integration project at the expense of the people of Europe, as the Euro project itself amply demonstrates in the ruination it's brought to many countries in southern Europe.
Well, I'm just bound to say that businesses up and down Wales concerned about their exports after Brexit would just simply not share the member's view. And looking at even the UK government's own figures, as I mentioned earlier, show that any conceivable additional value value to the economy from increased flexibility, as they would describe it, is completely dwarfed by the hit to the economy from the loss of markets.
Question 3, Darren Miller.
What opportunities has the Welsh Government identified for Wales as a result of the UK's departure from the EU?
All the sensible evidence shows that the potential economic benefits of any new trade deals are dwarfed by the negative impact of significant increases in barriers to trade with the EU. We continue to call for the closest possible economic relationship with the EU, as set out in Securing Wales's Future.
Thank you for that response. You'll be aware that one issue which regularly has cropped up in this chamber over the years has been the handcuffs that Wales is in as a result of EU procurement rules for the public sector. And many of those rules severely disadvantage smaller businesses, many of which are across Wales, wanting to get their foot in the door to be able to engage in trading with the public sector. What work is the Welsh Government doing to look at the opportunities that leaving the EU might bring to supporting a more localised purchasing policy across the public sector so that Welsh businesses can benefit from Welsh taxpayers' spending?
Well, of course, one of the issues is how rules are interpreted, and they often have more latitude than appears to be the case at
Why haven't you done anything about it then?
blush. And so the challenge is to ensure that as we our view is that the best position for the Welsh economy is broad regulatory alignment with the European Union, but there is scope within that to seek the most flexible interpretation of rules that is permissible. I would say to him, in terms of other opportunities from the departure from the EU, one of the issues which we are considering at the moment is how we can better integrate regional investment funding with other government spending. That requires a commitment from the UK government to ensure that we are no worse off in terms of regional investment funding, and the opportunities and the rules and priorities for those should be set here in Wales. That will provide us with a base for us to be able to integrate those schemes in future, and I hope, since he's looking for opportunities, that he will join me in calling for those principles to be upheld.
Mick Anthony.
General, we have quite a number of relationships already within the EU, either in our own right from Wales or as part of a UK network, with a whole variety of institutions that have been extremely important and valuable to Wales. What steps is the Welsh Government taking to actually ensure that there is a mechanism whereby Wales, in its own right, can continue to engage with the European Union, possibly through the enhanced Wales office within Brussels, but ensure that at least if Brexit does happen, that we actually have a mechanism for engagement with those various territorial bodies, the Committee of the Regions and the various other institutions, which I think will be so vital and important to Wales in a post-Brexit future, if that happens.
Can I just endorse what the member, the premise of the member's question, really, which is the value which Wales derives not simply from the relationship with the European Union per se, but also from regions and nations across the European Union and the various institutions across Europe, in which we're represented. And I know of his own work, for example, on the Committee of the Regions for many years. It's imperative for us that we maintain, as far as possible, that network of relationships which are beneficial to us in economic terms, but also in cultural terms, and also in the sense of Wales's brand in the world, which is an important focus. Again, that is part of the work which the Minister for International Relations will be taking forward.
Cwestiwn 4, Llawn Wood.
What discussions has the Council General had with the Deputy Minister and Chief Whip regarding how the Welsh Government will protect women and minorities from hate crime following Brexit?
I've had a preliminary discussion about these issues with the Deputy Minister and Chief Whip, and we'll be meeting her again next week to consider them in more detail. We are already delivering our Tackling Hate Crime programme and expanding our community cohesion work to seek to mitigate any rise in hate crime.
It was reported towards the end of last year that recorded hate crime in Wales and England rose by 17% to 94,000 in the 12 months to March of last year. The Home Office say improvements in the way that crime is recorded could partly account for the large increase that has been evident for the last 5 years, but they acknowledge that there was a spike in the immediate aftermath of the EU referendum. Now, I've got no doubt in my mind and from my own experience that society has become less friendly for women and minorities since that referendum campaign, and this is reflected in social media in particular. Will your government send out a strong message condemning such hate crimes and ensuring that victims know what, if any, support services are available to them? And would you also be prepared to open up dialogue with the social media companies to ensure that swift action is taken to shut down online hate crimes?
I thank the member for that question, and I recognise the point that she made in relation to the spike in hate crime, which we've discussed in this chamber before, and is absolutely shocking that should arise in the context of the debates that we are having now, I absolutely will give the assurance that she asks for, that we send a very clear signal that there is no place for hate crime against any of our communities here in Wales. I know that she has an event coming up in the Senedd in a few days' time, I believe, from which I'm sure that signal will also be sent out. As part of the preparedness work in relation to Brexit, we have expanded the Community Cohesion Programme and funded a EU Citizens' Rights project, which will work together with the third sector and local governments to ensure that there are appropriate advice services, and also stepped up engagement with our All Wales BAME engagement programme through the Equality and Inclusion funding stream. She will also know, of course, of the Hate Crime Inspection report, which came out recently by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, and highlighted some particularly good practice here in Wales, in particular in the Gwent area.
Susie Davies.
Diolch, Llywydd. Councillor General, during a debate on the Equality Committee's report into its post-legislative scrutiny work on the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Act, a number of members spoke out saying that healthy relationships should be part of the curriculum, with the now Deputy Minister for Social Services saying that it's absolutely key that we tackle attitudes to healthy relationships early on in a child's education, and the sooner we try to provide this on healthy relationships, the better. And I think the same observations can be made to hate crime in all its forms. Do you think then that that legislation might be necessary to ensure a place for this on the curriculum, or do you think that guidance and simple policy will be sufficient to make absolutely certain we get this?
We always need to be mindful of the best way of achieving these objectives. One of the issues which seems to me to be important is that we retain the level of flexibility to be able to respond to emerging dimensions in hate crime. It is unfortunately one of those areas which seems to find new outlets in different contexts. As Llawn Wood question indicated, the social media has provided a whole new platform, hasn't it, for individuals to be able to express views which we would find abhorrent in this chamber, and it's incumbent on us all, I think, to find ways of ensuring that is eradicated, and educating children and young people in responsible means of being online, and also in the nature of relationships, both community relationships and personal relationships, is an important part of that.
Joyce Watson.
Diolch, Llywydd. And in my opinion, there's no doubt that the Brexit campaign normalised bigotry and emboldened racists. And in the years to come, that awful poster and the shameful moments like the UK Minister Penny Mordaunt barefacedly lying to the country on breakfast TV about the UK not having a veto over Turkey's accession will rightly be judged as stains on our politics. So we have a lot of healing to do. So whatever happens or doesn't happen in the very near future, do you see any potential, Minister, within the European Transition Fund to support action to tackle hate crime, especially if there's a no-deal Brexit? And also, there are fears that a no-deal Brexit would lead to an escalation and entrenchment within our communities that is already existing since those terrible campaigns run by people who were both racist and bigots.
Yes. Well, I thank the member for that question. She and I have discussed the nature of some of the posters and communications that other parties were advocating during the referendum itself as being a reason why this culture shift has developed. Certainly, the European Transition Fund is being deployed to make the sorts of funding investment decisions that she is referring to in her question. And I think the Community Cohesion Programme in particular has benefited from an expansion as a result of that. We are very mindful that one of the issues we need to be very clear about is ensuring that community cohesion, which has always been a priority for us as a government, continues to be supported, and our regional community cohesion network is a key means for doing that.
Question 5, Helen Mary-Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. What discussions has the Council General had with the UK Government regarding the maintaining the transferability of professional qualifications for staff working in the health service, particularly nurses, if Brexit does proceed?
Officials are in regular contact with UK government counterparts on the mutual recognition of professional qualifications, including in relation to the health professions. I and Cabinet colleagues will continue to engage with UK government ministers to ensure that Welsh interests are protected and EU-qualified health professionals in Wales are unaffected.
I thank the Counsel-General for his answer, which is at some level reassuring. We have, of course, previously in this chamber discussed the difficulties that health and care services may face if we are unable to recruit staff from the EU. It's been particularly drawn to my attention that this will be a huge problem for the care sector, for the qualified nurses working not in hospital settings but in care homes. I hope the Counsel-General and the rest of the Government will continue with the discussions that he has outlined, because we would not wish to add to what is already perceived by many EU citizens as a bureaucratic process and potentially as a hostile environment, practical difficulties that would arise from the failure to recognise qualifications consistently across boundaries.
I thank the member for her question. This is a very, very important area for the health professions and other professions as well. Veterinary surgeons, social workers and teachers all have concerns in relation to this area. The approach which is being discussed with the UK government is in relation to laying legislation in Parliament which will ensure that in the event of a no-deal Brexit, for example, that arrangements will be in place for professionals arriving and operating in the UK to have a means to seek the recognition of those qualifications. She will know, of course, that the regulation of health professions is a reserved matter to the UK government, and so we are working with them in relation to those. But we absolutely recognise how important this issue is for the health service, allied health services and our public services generally.
Davis.
And I think the Minister's response is of some reassurance, but there is still work to be done, of course. But could I also ask the Minister to give us an update on the settled status pilots for health and for social workers as well, and whether the UK Government has shown any unexpected last-minute flexibility towards the issue of the settlement of family members of those workers, as requested by the former Cabinet Secretary, now Minister for Health. What professional, quite simply, would choose to come and work and make this country their own if they're told, you're welcome, but not your family? And on that important matter of family, and being proudly part of a large family that includes a couple of generations of Italian Welsh immigrants who came here from poor parts of Italy, this doesn't affect us directly, but would the Minister care to reflect on the indignity which is now being heaped on people who've lived and worked and paid taxes here all of their working lives, now being asked to leap hurdles to prove that they're worthy of staying? When I read stories like that of a 90-year-old Italian Bradford lady who came here from an impoverished part of Italy in the aftermath of the Second World War, who now has Alzheimer's and is now being fingerprinted in order to prove her identity, I wonder what level of shame, what level of indignity the UK as a country and the UK government in particular is now stooping to.
Absolutely. The member described the situation and a very traumatic situation for the individuals concerned with passion, and I would endorse his remarks. I'm aware that a response has been received in relation to the question of settled status and the family challenge which the Welsh Government made to the UK Government in relation to this, and unfortunately that has not taken us further forward at all. So we are at completely different polar ends of the spectrum in relation to this and what we think is an appropriate way of proceeding. In relation to this, he will have seen as well in the immigration white paper which the UK Government brought out before Christmas, a similar approach to families of temporary workers, for example, which is a system which would be appalling in its consequences for us here in Wales. We are anxious that the arrangements, flawed though they are, which the UK Government has put in place in relation to settled status, should be continued even in the context of a no-deal Brexit, because failing to do that, I think, would put even further pressure on EU citizens who are already living here in Wales and face the sort of indignities which he describes in his question.
What discussions has the Counsel-General had with the Minister for Economy and Transport regarding preparing businesses in Wales for leaving the EU?
The whole Cabinet is committed to supporting Welsh businesses through Brexit. I attended the Cabinet Subcommittee on EU transition in December, where the Minister for Economy and Transport presented a detailed paper on preparing business for Brexit, and we continue to engage closely with businesses across Wales.
Thank you, Counsel-General, for that answer. When the previous First Minister was giving evidence to the External Affairs Committee a few weeks ago, he said over 100 businesses in Wales had already engaged with the Welsh Government's Brexit Business Portal. We know that the landscape post-Brexit is so unknown, principally due to the shambolic approach taken by Theresa May with the negotiations. And with that in mind, how is the Welsh Government ensuring the portal is able to deliver accurate legal advice on matters such as exporting and hiring staff?
Thank the member for that further question. The Minister for Economy launched the portal back in September, I believe it was, and the point of the portal is to provide a diagnostic toolkit for businesses to cover the whole range of potential challenges which might arise in the context of Brexit, and to support them in readiness for a post-Brexit world. And as her question refers, one of the major issues there is international trading questions and workforce planning questions, both of which are factors that businesses are concerned about in the context of Brexit. The Paratoi Cymru website, which I mentioned earlier, will of course direct businesses to that portal to further highlight its availability, and also a range of other measures which the government have put in place to support businesses through Brexit. And the Business Resilience Fund, funded through the EU Transition Fund, is a primary example of that.
David Melding.
Llywydd, if I may amplify Vicky Howells's point, I mean, the true irony of our current position is that the vast majority of businesses that export into the single market will want to continue to observe the regulatory framework that is set today and for the future by the EU. I've heard what you've said about the preparations, but will you also be working with the likes of the CBI, who have emphasised how important it is that firms, many of them quite small incidentally, that export, and they are in Wales sometimes, get that information so that they can observe the legal frameworks of safety design, quality design standards, and other matters to allow exports to flow as freely, given the situation in terms of whatever we may be in with tariffs and the like. It's really essential they get that information.
Absolutely. One of the strands for the preparedness work has been to identify areas where the characteristics of Wales in this context, the economic characteristics, might be slightly different from other parts of the UK and therefore need a particular approach. And obviously having a business sector which is so well represented by the SME sector is one of those aspects. In addition to working with other partners, there is a Brexit-focused Business Wales marketing campaign which has been launched to raise awareness of exactly the sorts of things which he identifies, and asking businesses to plan and adjust and innovate in their response to in response to Brexit, and that includes a direct call to action to ask companies and businesses to complete the Brexit self-assessment through the diagnostic tool on the portal.
Finally, David Rees.
Counsel-General, in relation to this matter, clearly the businesses that have been helped and mainly through the portal are mainly exporters, but there's a lot of supply chain businesses in that link. What discussions are you having with the businesses to look at their supply chains, to ensure supply chains are also supported in this process? Because we rely very much upon some of those other businesses to keep us going. And automotive is an example. There are many automotive component companies in Wales that may not be directly exporting, but supply to companies that do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's absolutely the case, and that is a part and parcel of the advice which is provided through the portal. The reality of the situation is that many businesses aren't actively planning yet for the consequences of Brexit. The First Minister and the Minister for the Economy have recently called on businesses to ensure they are doing all they can to actively engage and actively prepare for Brexit. I'll take this opportunity, if I may, to add to those calls for businesses to do that.
Diolch i'r Cwnsler Cyffredinol. Yr eitem nesaf felly yw'r cwestiynau amserol. Mae'r cwestiwn cyntaf i ofyn i'r prif weinidog a'r cwestiwn gan Mick Antonov.
First Minister, what assessment have you made of the impact on Wales of the UK Parliament vote on the 15th of January 2019 on the UK government's Brexit deal?
Llywydd, the Prime Minister's approach has been decisively rejected. We need a new House of Commons and a new government to find a fresh way forward. That approach should rule out a no-deal exit and protect jobs and the economy here in Wales.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. For 2 years, the Prime Minister has pursued a European policy dedicated to protecting the interests of the Tory party rather than the interests of the country. For 2 years, she has treated the people of Wales and the Welsh Assembly with total contempt. Every promise of engagement and participation has been broken. The UK is now in a state of constitutional rigor mortis. Government is paralysed and the UK has now become a laughing stock and the Prime Minister a beacon of incompetence. The US have Trump, we have Theresa May. Following last night's catastrophic and historic defeat, she says the government will listen and reach out across the Commons. But at the same time, she says her red lines stay in place. So no discussion on a customs union, no discussion on a single market, no discussions on free movement or the European Court of Justice, no discussions with Her Majesty's opposition. So having excluded everyone, the EU included, who on earth is she reaching out to? This is a fatally flawed Prime Minister, a Prime Minister in denial, leading a government that has no legitimacy, no mandate and no clue. First Minister, do you have any confidence in the Prime Minister?
Well, Llywydd, any Prime Minister who finds herself defeated in the way that this Prime Minister has been when attempting to discharge the single most important responsibility that will ever fall to her should resign. I think that is the constitutionally proper course of action, and she should face up to that, and she should take it. Having said that, Llywydd, let me say, as I always say in the chamber here, that whoever is the Prime Minister tomorrow, the Welsh Government will work with the government in the United Kingdom to make sure that the interests of people in Wales are always fully known and in front of whoever is the Prime Minister.
Darren Miller.
First Minister, will you agree with me that everybody in this chamber and in the UK House of Commons should respect the outcome of the vote in June 2016 and support the UK Government in seeking to work through the consequences of that as we leave the European Union? And furthermore, would you also agree with me that the biggest threat that there is to Wales is Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister in the United Kingdom? That's a worse threat than a no-deal Brexit. Higher taxes, more debt in our public services and more waste.
So the greatest threat to Wales is that we crash out of the European Union with no deal at all, with all the damage that that will do to business here in Wales, to jobs here in Wales. If the member is so fearful of a Jeremy Corbyn government, then no doubt he will be supporting calls in the House of Commons to defeat the government so that that can be put to the people of the country. Because if he is so sure of his point of view, then why is he so fearful of a general election?
No answer.
Can I ask the First Minister what happens now? I mean, what happens when Theresa May wins the vote of no confidence today? Would you agree with me that Jeremy Corbyn has no clear vision on Europe either? No clearer than Theresa May, so a general election would be a completely pointless distraction. Will you support a people's vote referendum instead?
Well, so the member asks what happens next. First of all, I certainly haven't given up on the prospect that the House of Commons will reject this government. His party will vote tonight in favour of a motion of no confidence. I wish he had the confidence in the no confidence motion that his party will support. That's what I want to see happen. I want to see this government defeated and a general election. And I completely disagree with him that a general election is an irrelevance, because not only would we have a government that would deliver a sensible approach to Brexit, but we would have a government that would turn its back on austerity and all the things that across this chamber, his party included, week after week call for here. There is so much more at stake in a general election. That's why we need a new government, and think what that would do for Wales.
Gareth Bennett.
Diolch, Llywydd. Thanks for your response to Mick Antony's question earlier, First Minister. I hear what you say, that you want the UK Parliament to rule out a no-deal Brexit. So at least you've made your position clear. Obviously, over here, we're in a completely different position to that. We don't see a no-deal Brexit as being a bad solution. We actually see it as a WTO deal Brexit rather than a no-deal Brexit. Now, we did have a statement yesterday from your Brexit Minister, which I thought contained some useful elements, in that he was outlining many plans that the Welsh Government were formulating, advising businesses and so on, about the eventuality of the UK leaving the EU on March the 29th. Obviously, as you've stated, that's not your preferred option, but if you're going along with your Brexit Minister, that is an eventuality that you now have to consider. And I think you would do well to focus your efforts on making plans for the UK leaving the EU on March the 29th and how that affects Wales, rather than doing what you've been doing as a government for the last 2.5 years and trying to thwart Brexit. Would you agree, First Minister, that that would be a sensible approach? And another question I do have is, I note from following Adam Price's social media, which we do fanatically in the UKIP group, that there were some cross-party talks, I believe, taking place involving Adam and possibly Paul Davis. So, just out of interest, we were the only party that supported Brexit. So, just wondered why weren't we invited? Thank you.
Let me respond to the first question first. Let me be clear. I say time and again, I said again now, leaving the European Union without a deal would have a catastrophic impact upon the economy here in Wales, or public services in Wales, and in the lives of ordinary Welsh citizens. Does that mean that we do not prepare against that eventuality, especially as it looms larger? Well, of course, as a responsible government, we prepare against that day, and our preparations have stepped up since September of last year and been reported regularly to the Assembly. Those are the matters to which the Council-General referred yesterday. We will report on them again on the floor of the Assembly next week, not because we are prepared to contemplate for a moment supporting such a course of action, but we have a responsibility to people in Wales to take action should that turn out to be the case. The member is right that I met earlier today with the leaders of Plaid Cymru and the Welsh Conservatives, grateful to them for finding the time to have those discussions, and I did so on the basis that 3 parties in this Assembly are dedicated to a form of Brexit which would mitigate the impact of that here in Wales, whereas the party that Mr Bennett represents has the position that he articulated here this afternoon. He believes there is no need to prepare for a no-deal Brexit because he welcomes that prospect. Others here don't, and that's why I decided I would discuss matters with them.
Alan Davis.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Like yourself, First Minister, the defeat of the UK Government last night in the House of Commons was truly historic. I agree with your analysis, and had the Prime Minister any sense of obligation to the country, she would have resigned this morning as a consequence of that. I also hope that the House of Commons will pass a vote of no confidence in the United Kingdom Government this evening. I'm surprised that some of the signatories to that motion don't seem so committed to it. But it is a reality, First Minister, that whatever happens in the House of Commons tonight and whatever happens in the House of Commons next Monday, we are running out of time to reach a conclusion to these conversations. We are running out of time to find a solution. The extent and the size of the defeat of the United Kingdom government's policy last night means that they can't simply return with a tweaked deal and hope that that will be passed. Is it now time for us not simply to look again at Article 50, but to withdraw Article 50, to enable us to have the time to have a real debate in this country and across our parliaments about the sort of way forward, and that way forward is then put to the people in a referendum, which will be an honest referendum, and where people will be able to state their case and make their choice?
Well, I agree with what Alan Davies said about us running out of time. And that should be no surprise to anybody. We've been warned about that for many months, that the clock is ticking away, and now we're in the final part of leaving the European Union, and we need more time. We need more time to have the discussions that Alan Davies referred to. There's more than one way in which that could be brought about. I have called today for a suspension of the Article 50 timetable. And I think there will be a willingness on the part of the European Union to agree to that, provided they know, in the way that Alan Davies said, that the discussions that are to be held over the next few days are not about tweaking Mrs May's deal at the margins. That will never satisfy 230 members of the House of Commons. The Prime Minister has to abandon her failed and flawed policy of negotiating through a series of red lines, constantly telling everybody else what she will not agree to. She needs to find out what other people are prepared to agree to. She has to show the flexibility that genuine leadership would involve, and in that way, given the time that Alan Davies has pointed to, there is still an opportunity to do a deal that will be in line with the prospectus set out in securing Wales's future and would allow us to leave the European Union in a way that protects our long-term interests.
Lynn Eagle.
Thank you, Llywydd. First Minister, the size of the Tory defeat last night was such that it's now plain that the only choices left are a Brexit that the two major parties support, the disaster of a no deal, or a people's vote. Given that any Brexit deal would leave Wales worse off, would deepen the poverty trap and entrench austerity, would you agree with me that the only serious option now for those who want to put the people of Wales first is a people's vote?
I don't agree with that, Llywydd. I think we will come to the point when that may very well be the case. And if we reach that point, then going back to the people, having a final say on this matter may have to be the way through the impasse that the House of Commons would find itself in if it wasn't able to do what Lynn Eagle pointed to in the first part of her question, and that is to find a form of Brexit on which the House of Commons can agree. Now, we may well feel here that that is a remote possibility, but the Prime Minister said yesterday, she repeated it in a telephone conversation that I had with her late yesterday evening, that she is to reach out to other parties and other parliamentarians, that she is to involve devolved administrations in those discussions with a view to finding a different way through this impasse. I think if she is in a position to do that after today, I think we have to allow her the few days at her disposal to see if that can be brought about. If there is a deal that she can do that meets the test set out by my party, that sets out the test set out in securing Wales' future, there may yet be a deal there to be done. If that is not the case, then I agree, in those circumstances, with what Lynn Eagle said, that the decision will have to go back to the people.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog. Cwestiwn nesaf yw ofyn i'r Gweinidog Economi a Thrafnidiaeth, ac mae'r cwestiwn gan Rhina Biorwer.
Diolch Llywydd. Pa drafodaethau mae'r Gweinidog wedi cael ynglŷn â dyfodol Wylfa Newydd?
Diolch. As I outlined in my written statement to members yesterday, I've spoken with the Minister for Energy and Industry. I've also written to the Secretary of State for Bays. I'm pressing for an urgent response by the UK Government on actions that it is taking on this matter. I'm also in regular contact with Horizon. I'll be meeting with the leader of Anglesey Council tomorrow. I'll be speaking with the Secretary of State for Wales later today and I'll be attending an emergency meeting of the Economic Ambitions Board on Monday. Further, I'm in very regular contact with the local Member of Parliament, Albert Owen MP, as well as with other Members of Parliament who are seeking to press UK Government to secure Hitachi's investment.
Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. Da ni'n disgwyl gyhoeddiad, dwi'n meddwl, dros nos heno, fel dydodd aelod uwch o staff Wilfa wrthai yn y dyddiad diwetha, dydy hi ddim yn edrych yn dda. Mae rhaid i fi ddeud mod i wedi dod i gasgliad ers rhyw gwbl o fisoedd erbyn hyn bod y prosiect mewn sefyllfa ddifrifol tu hwnt. Yn amlwg mae Brexit wedi cyfyngu ar capacity Llywodraeth Prydain i wthio'r cytundeb drwodd ac i chwilio am fodel ariannu. Mae pobl o fewn Wilfa'n deud hynny yn berffaith glir wrtho fi. Yn gam neu'n gymwys, mi oedd penderfyniad Llywodraeth Cymru alw mewn y cais cynllunio ar gyfer gwaith baratoi ar y safle, hefyd yn cael ei weld fel ychwanegiad at risg y prosiect hefyd. Ond y canlyniad ydy bod prosiect oedd yn ganolog i gynlluniau economaidd y môn yn y gogledd ac yn wir ar gyfer Cymru gyfan rwan yn y fantol a deud y lleia. Mi o'n i'n gwerthfawrogi cael y datganiad ddoe, deud eich bod chi'n siarad efo Llywodraeth Prydain, gai ofyn os oes yna ragor o drafod uniongyrchol wedi bod efo gweinidogion Llywodraeth Prydain heddiw gan Lywodraeth Cymru ac ydych chi wedi ceisio dylanwadu'n uniongyrchol efo partneriaid yn Japan. Gai sicrwydd hefyd bod y prif weinidog yn bersonol wedi bod yn rhan o drafodaethau heddiw, fel oedd yn hollol iawn i wneud yn achos Ford bore yma. Mae'n bwysig iawn, dwi'n meddwl, bod prif weinidog Cymru yn cael ei weld yn chwarae rhan uniongyrchol mewn trafodaethau yn ogystal ar ôl gallwch chi ei chwarae wrth gwrs fel gweinidog. Mae Wilfa ydy'n ganolog i ddatblygiadau economaidd yn y dyfodol, ond wrth gwrs mae yna ddatblygiadau eraill rhagorol yn mynd ymlaen yn Ynys Môn ar hyn o bryd. Dwi'n meddwl am gynlluniau yn ei adnewyddol ac yn y blaen, y parc gwyddoniaeth. Ond gai sicrwydd rwan, os ydy'r gweitha'n dod ac yn cael ei gadarnhau, y bydd Llywodraeth Cymru'n chwilio i fuddsoddi'n rhagor yn y cynlluniau hynny ac yn gwthio am fuddsoddiad ychwanegol gan Lywodraeth Prydain i wneud iawn am ei methiant i ddilifro Wilfa os mai dyna fydd y canlyniad. Gai hefyd wthio os mae'r gweitha gawn ni am ymrwymiad, a'ch bod chi'n dechrau rwan ar ffyrdd o weithredu hyn, ymrwymiad i roi hob economaidd i ogledd yr ynys yn arbennig yn cynnwys cyfeirio datblygiad economaidd i diffiniau amlwch, agor lein amlwch fel mater o ferder ac yn y blaen. Weinidog beth bynnag y farn am niwclear, a dwi'n deall yn iawn i fod o'n bwnc sy'n rhannu barn pobl, ond mae llawer o bobl môn, pobl ifanc, Cymru ifanc, y môn, sy'n barod i gael ei denu i ffwrdd gan gyfleon economaidd eraill, wedi bod yn edrych ymlaen am gyfleon yn Wilfa newydd. Os na ddawo, mae'n rhaid sicrhau bod ni'n gwneud popeth i sicrhau dyfodol iddyn nhw.
I'd agree entirely with the member, and I'd say to begin with regard to this entire project, the reports that we have seen in the news in recent days are merely speculation. However, we do expect a decision to be made UK time by around about 10 a.m. tomorrow. I'll be visiting Anglesey tomorrow afternoon to meet with the leader of the council, by which time I expect we will know what the Hitachi board's decision is. The reason that I asked for an emergency Economic Ambitions Board meeting to take place as soon as possible, and it will be taking place on Monday morning, is because I'd like to discuss with stakeholders and partners in North Wales how we might go about, in the short term, if this project is merely paused, how we might go about ensuring that there are opportunities for people to get work in a similar field in and around Anglesey until another investor comes forward and takes the project back off the shelf, or until the UK government decides to invest more in the programme and nationalise it. Already they've pledged £5 billion. I don't see why they shouldn't now consider providing all of the financial support and nationalising the project. In doing so, I'd like to discuss with stakeholders and local government partners, leaders in FE and HE, and with businesses, what additional support we require from UK government as part of the Growth Deal programme. I'd already said that Welsh Government is willing to increase its support from £120 million on the basis of the UK Government first increasing its allocation to the growth deal. Partners in North Wales had requested £170 million for the growth deal, and UK Government, in spite of this comprehensive ask and programme of projects, offered £120 million. My view is that that sum, if Hitachi do pause the project, should be significantly increased. I think it's also important to stress that my officials have been in constant contact with BEIS over many weeks and months. The member is right to point out that Brexit has had both a direct and indirect impact on deliberations, indirect insofar as how it has diverted attention and indeed key officials within Whitehall from the Wilver Newydd project, and that has had an impact in terms of, I believe, in terms of confidence in Japan. Welsh Government will do all that it can to ensure that this project is taken forward. Importantly, we will do all that we can to make sure that the people of Anglesey and the people of North Wales benefit as much as possible from the project. Tomorrow we'll know whether the project is to be paused. My hope is that it will not be cancelled, and if it is paused, then work must begin immediately across governments and with local government and with the business community in ensuring that there are job opportunities in the short term whilst we find a new investor for the project.
Mark Isherwood.
We know that the Holyhead infrastructure prospectus says that the Wilver Newydd nuclear new build, along with other proposed developments in Anglesey, presents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to transform the economy and communities of the island. And as you rightly said yesterday, this project has potentially significant benefits to Anglesey, North Wales and the UK. We know that the subsidiary of Hitachi, Horizon, has been investing heavily in apprenticeships and training centres, including Llandrach Menai College Group and Bangor University. And we know that the growth deal has been based on the premise that the Wilver project would go ahead. Dr Jones at Bangor University said yesterday he believes it's more likely to press the pause button than scrap the project because of the £2 billion investment already. But I'm also advised that one of the factors that have added to the cost considerations that have led to this threatened decision was the Welsh Government decision to call in plans to prepare the site last month to build Wilver Newydd. And when Horizon said it disagreed with the Welsh Government's reasoning. Given your statements yesterday and today that you've spoken with the Minister for Energy and Industry, Richard Harrington MP, in Westminster, and that your officials are in close dialogue with Horizon Nuclear Power, what currently is your understanding of the position regarding the likely outcome and its impact on things like those apprenticeship placements and the possibility that this might just be a pause rather than the devastating announcement of project ending?
In a lifetime opportunity for North Wales, for Wales and for the UK. The Hitachi technology is recognised as being the most reliable technology that can be deployed, and it's important that UK government does all that it can to secure that investment and the Hitachi technology for Anglesey. I disagree with the member, and I think the member, if he had correct intelligence, he would agree with me that calling in the planning application was not a significant issue whatsoever. What really changed in the last month or so, or actually more than the last month, because I think UK government will be aware of the situation about a month ago, but what has happened steadily has been a lack of and a loss of interest by UK government, both at an official level and at a ministerial level. And that was highlighted just last week when the Prime Minister was in Japan and failed to raise this vitally important project whilst on a visit there. And just as I said yesterday, I'll repeat today, this is not a purely commercial matter for Hitachi. This programme would provide up to 10% of the UK's energy and work for thousands of people during construction, hundreds of people for many generations to come. And so I would call on the UK Government again, even in these final hours, to make every effort to get the right decision made at the Hitachi board tomorrow.
Mae pwynt wedi cael ei wneud yn blaenorol. Mae yna beryg, wrth gwrs, bod ni'n camddehongli diwylliant Siapaneaidd fan hyn, oherwydd mae colli gwyneb yn anodd i ni'n y gorllewin, ond mae'n anoddach byth, wrth gwrs, i Siapaneaidd. Ac mae yna beryg, felly, bod ni, tra bod ni'n meddwl bod y prosiect ar hold, mae mewn gwirionedd, dyna'i ffordd nhw o ddweud bod e ddim yn mynd i ddigwydd. Felly dwi'n meddwl bod angen i ni fod yn realistig o safbwynt beth fydd y rhagolygon pan glywn ni'n union beth yw'r penderfyniad. Ond yr hyn dwi'n dod ato fe, wrth gwrs, yw wedyn am ba hyd fydde Llywodraeth Cymru yn barod i aros trafod y cynllun ar hold. Chimod, mae yna gyrsiau yn cael eu hyrwyddo i hysbysebu. Ydyn ni'n dal i hyrwyddo hysbysebu rheini am y flwyddyn y ddwy nesaf sydd i ddod? Ydy cynllun twf Gogledd Cymru neu'r rhannau perthnasol o'r cynllun twf hwnnw ar y silff? Tan ni'n wybod beth sy'n digwydd, felly chimod ar ba bwynt fydd Llywodraeth Cymru yn derbyn fod rhaid tynnu llinell a symud ymlaen. Ac wrth gwrs i fi, mae symud ymlaen yn golygu buddsoddi'r biliynau o bunnau arfaethedig oedd yn y prosiect gwreiddiol fewn i ffynonellau yn ei adnewyddadwy a datgloi y potensial aruthrol hwnnw sydd ganddo ni yng Nghymru.
Well, indeed. I mean, the UK government could consider doing just that. We're looking at a number of major renewable projects that could attract UK government funding. But let's just focus on Wylfa Newydd for the moment, because this has to be our key concern over the coming days and indeed weeks. We don't yet know what, if you like, pause would look like. Would it entail a pause in the DCO process? My understanding is that that might not be the case, and the DCO process would continue. I would hope it would continue. Would pause entail telling the apprentices that they don't need to complete their frameworks for the time being? Well, again, I would hope that it wouldn't involve that, and the apprentices could complete their frameworks and get alternative employment until such a time as the project could be taken back off the shelf. We're going to have to just take a step back tomorrow if the decision is made to pause the project and assess what viable alternative investors there might be, and assess whether the UK government has the appetite to increase its stake in the project in order to get it off the mark again. I completely take the point about Japanese culture and the importance of not losing face. Equally, I know, having spoken with investors in Japan, having spoken with Hitachi, just how important this project is considered. And what they do not wish to do is to lose face with, as they say it, their British friends by scrapping a scheme that does have majority support on Anglesey, that could provide transformational opportunities for many, many people, and which would demonstrate a strong link between Wales, the UK and Japan. So the decision will be made with a huge amount of consideration, and I would hope that if it is paused, it really is just that, a pause, and that the processes such as the DCO process can continue so that the programme can either be taken off the shelf and completed by another investor, or so that it can be taken back off the shelf by Hitachi once, as I hope, the UK government will increase its offer.
Finally, Andrew Watty-Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, Deputy Presiding Officer. Minister, you made a big call when you responded to the member from Anglesey, when you said that the site should be considered for nationalisation. Is that official Welsh Government policy that this scheme should be nationalised? Because, as I said, that is a really big call, and I'd be interested to know what the Welsh Government's position is on nuclear power more generally, because obviously the current First Minister said that nuclear power should be treated sceptically, and has there been a shift in the way the Welsh Government offers its support for nuclear power projects? Because other members of the Cabinet, the Health Secretary for example, said such comments were troubling, and the External Relations Minister said that it would be deeply damaging if such a shift did occur within the Welsh Government.
Well, I thank the member for his question and stress that the First Minister said that his personal comment was that he was a nuclear sceptic for very good reason, because of incidents and accidents that have occurred in the past. However, I think it's recognised that our policy is to support the nuclear industry as part of an energy mix, and a very necessary energy mix. And in terms of my call for the project to be nationalised, I believe that this is something that has the support of my colleagues, but also, more importantly, has the support of shadow ministers and members of Parliament who are seeking to press the UK government to offer the maximum contribution that it can, and if necessary, if all other options are off the table, then to nationalise the programme.
Thanks very much. Item 4 then on agenda are 90-second statements, and we have one from Vicky Howells.
Diolch, Dipro Llawer. Earlier today, I sponsored a launch event for the 2019 VQ Awards. The awards are now in their 12th consecutive year, and their aim is to raise the status of technical, practical and vocational learning. Indeed, their purpose is to ensure that we regard vocational qualifications as an aspirational yet attainable route for all, and that we consider them to be equal to other educational routes. In this, they chime closely with the Welsh Government's aim, as stated in Prosperity for All, to make sure that there are no artificial barriers between vocational and academic qualifications. It is good to see the Welsh Government are one of the organisers of the awards, along with Coleg Cymru, the National Training Federation for Wales, Qualifications Wales and the Education Workforce Council. Today marks the start of the nomination process for this year's awards. There will be winners across 4 categories: intermediate learner, higher learner, employer and trainer. The process will culminate in VQ Day, a celebration of vocational qualifications which will take place on May the 15th. Whilst recognising outstanding achievements in its very existence, VQ Awards and VQ Day mark the benefits of an area of our education system that does not always get the attention it should, but one that is crucial to ensuring learners, employers and our economy more widely have the skills needed for future prosperity. So congratulations to last year's winners and good luck to the 2019 entrants.
Thank you very much. And we move on to motions under Standing Orders 17.14 to elect members to committees, and in accordance with the Standing Orders of 12.24 and 12.40, I propose the motions to elect members to committees are grouped for debate and for voting. It's fine, good. So can I call on the member of the Business Committee to move the motions formally, Darren?
I move.
Move formally. Does any member object? No. Therefore, the motions are therefore agreed in accordance with Standing Order 12.36. We have a motion under Standing Order 17.3 to elect a member to a committee. So I call again for a member of the Business Committee to move the motion.
I move.
Thank you. Proposal is to agree that motion. No member object. Therefore, the motion is agreed in accordance with Standing Order 12.36. Item 5 on our agenda this afternoon is the statutory instrument consent motion, the Marine Environment (Amendment) (EU) exit regulations of 2018, and I call on Susie Davies to move the motion.
Diolch yn fawr, Dipro Llawer. You'll see that's a very snappy title. So members will be relieved that the purpose of this brief debate is not to examine the policy intention of the Marine Environment Amendment EU Exit Regulations 2018, or indeed to really challenge the assertion of Welsh Government that it's appropriate for this Assembly to agree to the statutory instrument consent motion. It's more to do with drawing members' attention once again to the ability of the UK Government to sub-legislate on matters within the legislative competence of this Parliament, and considering concerns about how this Parliament can maintain its own oversight of how primary legislation, material to us, is being amended by secondary legislation of another Parliament. Now, until now, we've understandably focused our attention on primary legislation and related LCMs. I mean, we've encountered bills on agriculture and healthcare which have caused committees to raise their eyebrows, perhaps, and the Constitutional and Legislative Affairs Committee in particular will have plenty to say in due course about Welsh Government choices on whether to recommend LCMs or not, as well as the quality of the information that Welsh Government provides to this Assembly to help us scrutinise those choices. How easy it is then to lose sight of the reams of secondary legislation to which the same principles should apply. The UK Government is laying many statutory instruments affecting many more pieces of primary legislation in order to make retained EU law function after Brexit. And these could and indeed do, transfer executive functions in areas where we have legislative competence to Welsh ministers, or indeed secretaries of state, with the consent of Welsh ministers. And because we're talking about statutory instruments which are active in areas of devolved competence, we need to understand what Welsh ministers are actually agreeing to on our and of course their own behalf. There is a standing order process for this, but in reality, government decides whether we can rely on UK government statutory instruments, or whether they should introduce their own secondary legislation. And at the moment, the majority of reports we get from Welsh Government is that we can just agree these UK statutory instruments, as there's no policy divergence and it makes for a clearer statute book. That's the general content of the explanatory memoranda which come to members recommending Assembly support without the need for debate. Nothing to see here, everything's in order, why waste plenary time? And with so many statutory instruments coming through from the UK in devolved areas, we need to, as Assembly members, to be in a position where we can rely on ministerial judgment and avoid the need for debate. However, there are occasions, and an increasing number of them, where we can't safely rely on that judgment. It's not that the judgment is wrong, but we don't have the evidence to support the judgment, and it's deliberately why I've chosen this hopefully rather benign example to make my point. We're told in the Minister's covering statement that this UK statutory instrument could affect our legislative competence and Ministers' executive competence because we have some legislative and executive competence in relation to the marine environment. The Minister's own motion contains a little more detail on existing powers, but nothing more on our legislative competence, except that it's subject to a few reservations. A few examples given, but no concrete detail. It's also a negative procedure statutory instrument, limiting UK parliamentary oversight, so the eye of scrutiny is already less than optimal. And my argument to Welsh Government is this. If you think a UK statutory instrument is fine and you want us to accept your advice without debating it, just give us fuller advice. If we have some legislative competence, identify what it is. If Welsh ministers have various executive powers under a number of enactments, tell us what they are. And as you'll see, I've had to, with help obviously, draft and lay my own very similar consent motion to do this. And as an AM, I don't have the resources to research and draw down the information that civil servants can do. Your officials do know about what that legislative competence and what those executive powers are to make the assertions in the first place. So it's not enough to tell us what existing legislation is being amended. We need context and clarity about the effect of the change, and ministers need to be alert to that before they sign off. So why does this matter? So many of these statutory instruments amend primary legislation in devolved areas, and they can give powers to Welsh ministers. And if the only scrutiny we get is based on ministerial advice, the advice needs to be clear, comprehensive, and overcome any space for suspicion of a conflict of interest, because we shouldn't be allowing other parliaments to give our ministers powers without us being sure that we understand how, where, why, and what. I understand the irony of asking for you to consent to an SI, which I've just confessed I don't really understand myself, but I hope it proves the point. Thank you very much.
Can I call on the Chair of the Constitutional and Legislative Affairs Committee, Mick Anthony?
Thank you, Deputy Llywydd. My contribution this afternoon will set out the Constitutional and Legislative Affairs Committee's consideration of the statutory instrument consent memorandum for the Marine Environment Amendment EU Exit Regulations of 2018. The committee considered the Welsh Government's SICM for the Marine Environment Amendment EU Exit Regulations of 2018 at its meeting on the 10th of December 2018. At that time, the committee noted the accompanying letter from the then Cabinet Secretary for Energy, Planning and Rural Affairs, which stated, "Given the volume of legislation that the Assembly is considering, I do not believe that a debate on this statutory instrument would be a productive use of valuable plenary time." As permitted by standing orders on the 31st of December 2018, Susie Davies AM laid before the National Assembly a further statutory instrument consent memorandum for the Marine Environment Amendment EU Exit Regulations of 2018. The committee considered that SICM at its meeting this past Monday, and in doing so noted the members' reasons for laying the SICM and tabling the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Lloyd.
Diolch, Llywydd. And can I applaud Susie Davies for tabling this statutory instrument consent memorandum and her subsequent consent motion, because the bigger picture, we are where we are as regards Brexit regulations, and we must soldier on. And I'm not going to rehearse again our fears on this side of any Brexit power grabs. That's the bigger picture. As we've heard, Standing Order 30A states that government must lay a statutory instrument consent memorandum and motion if a UK statutory instrument allows UK ministers to amend primary legislation here in Wales in devolved areas. That's why it's important, and as I said, I applaud Susie for bringing this forward and shining a light on the importance of this. There is no particular disagreement as regards this particular instrument in front of us. It's just being used as an example, because we do have common frameworks now to sort out the EU withdrawal legislation. An awful lot of secondary legislation, as we've heard, is coming our way. We talk a lot about shared governance. In other words, it's not just one government in one place telling another government in another place what to do. Governance is meant to be shared now in an open spirit of respect and mutual confidence in one another. But obviously, on CLAC, on the Constitutional Legislative Affairs Committee, we do fret about these sort of things. We fret about not just the loss of powers from this institution to Westminster, we also fret about the possible loss of powers from this legislature to our own government. You know, both of those things occupy lots of the times, and that is the framework where we're having this discussion. So this is about this legislature being able to hold this government to account. And that's the importance of this little debate this afternoon. Because SICMs, the secondary legislative equivalent of LCMs, and we've got a recent LCM on the reciprocal health care arrangements, which we've seen a fairly blatant attempt by Westminster Government to broaden the scope of reciprocal health arrangements from just a simple transfer of functions. That's what we were all expecting. Simple transfer of functions because of Brexit. Simple transfer. And we've seen a blatant attempt to broaden the scope of that. And the Health Minister here, rightly at the moment, is minded to withhold legislative consent unless that particular bill is amended along the lines of all our concerns here. So that's the importance of this debate. It might be a twee constitutional point, but it's a very, very important one, because the volume of SICMs coming our way is quite startling, and we have, as Susie has said, many reports saying exactly the same thing, and our legislative support here is working extremely hard to keep up with it all, and we mustn't lose sight, because sometimes things possibly can we agree to if we don't look at the dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So I'm grateful to Susie so that we're able to shine a light on this. It highlights the potential sometimes for this Assembly legislature to be sidelined just because there isn't enough time, it's not important enough, there's too much work, and it's a government-to-government thing. Well, actually, it's about this legislature. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Can I now call the Minister for Environment, Energy and Rural Affairs to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I thank Susie Davies for bringing this motion forward. I did wonder if it was the detail of the Marine Environment Amendment EU Exit Regulations 2018 that you did want to look at with detail. I wouldn't call it bland, I'd call it technical, but I don't think it's twee either. I think it's really important point that's been raised. But if I could just say the UK's withdrawal from the European Union has created an unprecedented legislative programme across all governments in the UK. We are all working to amend EU-derived law so that we do have a fully functioning statute book at the point of exit, whenever that is. And I think it's absolutely vital that the Welsh statute book remains operable. Our approach here reflects the real and pressing need to respond to the extraordinary circumstances surrounding Brexit, rather than any attempt whatsoever to limit or frustrate the Assembly's role as a legislature. It's been necessary to work with the UK Government on some aspects of the process of legislating for Brexit due to the sheer volume of legislation required. The UK Government's been producing its own SIs in some areas devolved to Wales, but only with the consent of the Welsh Ministers under the terms of the intergovernmental agreement. We are notifying the Assembly whenever the UK SIs to which we have consented are laid in Parliament, and to date we've notified the Assembly of 76 such instruments. The Welsh Ministers only consent to the UK statutory instruments where there's no divergence on policy between Wales and the UK, and the decisions made by Welsh Ministers are designed to balance the extraordinary set of demands created by Brexit with the Welsh Government's commitment to provide the greatest possible practical opportunities for scrutiny of those legislative actions which have a material rather than simply a technical purpose. Deputy Presiding Officer, I think it would be helpful for members to recognise if we'd taken the decision to make all EU exit legislative corrections for devolved areas solely in Wales, it would have required 200 statutory instruments and at least 4 bills to be laid in the Assembly in addition to business as usual legislation. It would only be possible to pass the necessary bills in the available time by following the fast-track procedure, which again would limit scrutiny by the Assembly. And even then, even if we excluded all of the business, it would have taken approximately 6 months of Assembly time. So I don't think it's a matter of me believing it's a waste of Assembly time. I just think it is very practical. I just would like to reassure members as well. I look at every SI on an individual basis, which of course you would all expect me to do so. My officials provide me with very detailed advice. I've also worked very closely with the Council General in relation to these SIs, but I'd be certainly very happy to look at your suggestions, Susie Davis, to see if we can bring forward more detail in the written statements we bring forward. Thank you.
I'm going to call on Susie Davis to reply to the debate.
Diolch i'r Llywydd, and thank you for your allowing me a couple of extra seconds on this. First of all, thank you very much to the Minister and to Di Lloyd for their contributions. Part of having this debate was to give the Minister an opportunity to explain to us all quite what the volume of this work looks like, but that it doesn't let Ministers off the hook either from giving us the fullest relevant explanation to help us be satisfied that you're doing the right thing on our behalf. So I was delighted to hear that you said that you get really the fullest advice from your officials. While we don't necessarily want something the size of a stamp, if we could get something that's in between what we're getting now and what perhaps you're getting from your officials, I think that would bring some reassurance to us as a Parliament that we're doing the right thing in trusting your judgment. And can I just apologise that you got stuck with this particular debate, because the point is a general one to all members of government and not just to the poor minister who's had to respond today. Thank you.
Thank you. The proposal is to agree the motion. Does any member object? No. Therefore, the motion is therefore agreed in accordance with Standing Order 12.36. Now move on to item 6, which is a debate on the general principles of the Autism Bill, Wales. Before I call the member in charge to move the motion, can I just make a plea that we have a lot of speakers who wish to speak. So if your contributions can be trimmed, then that would be really good. You would get more of it, more people in the debate. But if not, then I'm afraid I'll apologise now to some of you. You won't be called. So just if you can bear that in mind. So we'll move to the debate, and I'll call on the member in charge of the motion. To move that motion.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'm pleased to open today's debate as the member in charge of the Autism Wales Bill. I'd like to take this opportunity from the outset to thank Catherine Hunt and her team for their tremendous support and guidance during the development passage of this bill. Can I also thank NAS Cymru, the countless stakeholders and people up and down Wales who have helped make this bill a reality. I'd like to thank each of the committees who has considered and reported on this bill, and those who contributed to the committee's work by providing evidence. I'm grateful to those committees for their scrutiny of the bill and the useful recommendations they have made. I've written to the chairs of the committees outlining my response to the recommendations, and the letter has been published ahead of this debate. I've carefully considered each of the reports and their recommendations, and I hope that members have been able to see my response and recognise that I've listened to concerns raised. Where possible, I have accepted the recommendations and am committed to undertaking any further research or tabling amendments to the bill in order to alleviate concerns. I'd like to briefly say a few words in response to the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee's recommendation around the remedies available to citizens should they not receive the services they expect. I fully support the rationale of this recommendation. However, as I explained in my written response, I am unable to implement it at this time. I can assure members that should the general principles be agreed, I would be happy to work with members or to consider any amendments tabled during the amending periods with the aim of strengthening the bill in this respect. I acknowledge that members of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee were unable to reach consensus on whether this bill is the best way of achieving the improvements needed in autism services. But the fact that improvements are needed is emphasised throughout its report. I believe that my bill will drive the necessary improvements. As I said when I introduced this bill, evidence from the 2 consultations I ran showed that services for people with autism are inconsistent across Wales and in some areas inadequate. This was evident in the Health Committee's report, which stated that families it heard from have been waiting for 10 years for the autism strategy to deliver the services they need, but still they are struggling. These families are real people in all of our constituencies. Children and young people with autism aren't fulfilling their potential. Parents are despairing because the services they need aren't available. We shouldn't still be in a situation where parents say that services aren't there and everything was a fight. These families deserve better. People with autism have waited long enough. Urgent action is needed now to ensure that more support services are put in place. That's not just my view. That's the conclusion of the Health Committee, based on the evidence it received directly from families. The lived experience shared with the committee is testament that current arrangements are not fit for purpose. The committee concluded that the current difficulties people with autism and their families face in accessing support are unacceptable. That's why this bill is so important. This bill will ensure that a national autism strategy for Wales will be a statutory requirement, and the services people with autism can expect to receive will be enshrined in law. I agree with the Health Committee that there is a pressing need to improve autism support services and that this must be addressed as a matter of priority. I firmly believe that legislating in this way is the most effective route for delivering the improvements needed to ensure that people with autism get the support they deserve. My bill identifies autism as a condition which requires greater attention, and it sends out a strong message that Wales is committed to ensuring that people with autism receive high-quality, accessible services wherever they live in Wales on a permanent basis. I share concerns highlighted by the Finance Committee around the Welsh Government's interaction with this bill. I fully agree with the committee that the Welsh Government has a responsibility to provide financial information to Assembly members in their preparation of legislation, and in light of the First Minister's response to the committee, my concerns remain. The Health Minister has made it clear that he does not support this bill. Instead, he is consulting on a code of practice of the delivery of autism services. He told committees that the code will do everything that the bill wants to do, but I do not believe the code will be sufficient to deliver the changes needed to improve services. My concerns are shared by the National Autistic Society and others, and I will outline some of these today. My bill would place a duty on the Welsh Government to prepare and publish an autism strategy, as well as review and revise it based on independent assessment. But there is no reference in the code to duties on Welsh Government to publish, review or revise the Code or Autism Action Plan. It's important to stress the proposed code is not mandatory on health bodies. A further worry for people with autism and their families is the fact that the code can be reversed at any time by the Welsh Government. This is a far cry from the permanent and all-encompassing regime set out in the bill. My bill ties the timescale for autism diagnosis to those set out by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, 3 months from referral to start of diagnostic assessment. The long wait for diagnosis is an area of enormous concern to many people with autism and their families. NICE standards are based on evidence and clinical expertise, but despite recognising the importance and authority of NICE on other aspects of healthcare, the Welsh Government has chosen to ignore them on waiting times for autism diagnosis and remain attached to a 26-week target for children and as yet no target for adults. I have yet to see the evidence on which this target is based on. The code is heavily tied to the Social Services and Wellbeing and Additional Learning Needs Acts, whereas my bill includes provisions much wider than those acts. My bill provides for meeting needs of people with autism and their carers in relation to Welsh language, employment, education and advocacy, but there are no duties or requirements in the code relating to any of these areas. Instead, the code says that health boards and local authorities should make reasonable adjustments. This is far weaker than the statutory duty in the bill and essentially allows Welsh Government to carry on doing more of the same. I'm concerned by the narrow remit of the code as it doesn't provide for these wider aspects of a person's life. A broader, holistic approach is essential if we are to ensure that people with autism are able to achieve their potential and lead valued and fulfilling lives. The powerful evidence given by families living with autism, both via my consultations and during scrutiny, more than bears this out. Whilst the bill includes provision to ensure services reflect and facilitate transition from childhood to adulthood, the code refers to transition when leaving school, but there are no requirements or duties in the code to promote this in a meaningful way. We're all aware of the invaluable role played by families and friends in providing informal care to their loved ones, which is why my bill strengthens and supports for families and carers of people with autism. Such a commitment does not exist in the code, which merely includes a requirement to make carers aware of their right to an assessment under the Social Services Act. This is of particular concern to me, as I do not believe this is sufficient to meeting the needs of those carers. I'd like to now address criticism directed at the bill, citing that it is diagnosis-led. This claim is simply misleading. The bill is not solely concerned with diagnosis, but instead puts forward an overarching regime that seeks to address all the needs of a person with autism, both pre- and post-diagnosis. Nowhere does the bill state that a diagnosis of autism is or should be a requirement for receiving services. Indeed, having a diagnosis of autism is not an automatic passport to services. My bill specifically provides that services can be delivered prior to a formal diagnosis. It has been claimed that the bill will result in an increase in diagnosis, but diagnostic criteria are determined by developments in scientific knowledge and professional practice and will not change as a result of this bill. And it is not morally defensible to argue that people with autism should go undiagnosed simply on financial grounds or for lack of resources. Conversely, the data collection requirements in the bill will assist in identifying any tendency to overdiagnosis by health boards, which in turn will lead to more efficient targeting of resources. Evidence from existing trials in Wales has clearly established that the gathering of key data by the NHS, such as that prescribed in Section 6 of the bill, can lead to long-term improvements in the diagnosis of autism and delivery of related support services. The limited and unproven data collection requirements in the proposed code would not offer these benefits. I accept that initiatives have been developed recently, notably the establishment of the Integrated Autism Service. The Minister has told the Assembly that the IAS needs time to embed, yet 2 of the 7 services have not yet been rolled out. West Wales and Western Bay aren't expected to be in place until April 2019. This process has taken far too long. How can members be confident that the IAS will deliver for their constituents when so many are still waiting for the service to be rolled out? Furthermore, the final evaluation of the Strategic Action Plan and IAS has not yet been published. The final report will provide important, independent evidence on the effectiveness of the Welsh Government's Autism Strategic Action Plan. And without sight of this crucial information, members cannot make a meaningful assessment of the Welsh Government's approach. I'd like to make it clear that my bill will not result in wholesale changes to the structure and configuration of autism services, but seeks to underpin and further strengthen developments which are already underway. My bill is designed to complement and be compatible with Welsh Government's existing activities, save for certain key improvements such as diagnostic waiting times, and as such is wholly realistic and achievable. Today's vote isn't about whether the bill in its current form will become law. It's about agreeing the general principles to enable further scrutiny to take place. Should the general principles not be agreed today, the bill will fall and members will have no further opportunity to shape the way autism services are developed in Wales. Agreeing the general principles will enable members to table and debate the amendments they would like to see to the bill. This is the only way of ensuring that members are at the forefront of shaping the future development of autism services. There will be no further opportunity should the bill fall today. Whilst the Welsh Government is consulting on a code, it will not undergo the scrutiny afforded to a bill, and members will not be given a final say on its content. I passionately believe my bill will deliver real and sustainable improvements to the lives of people in Wales with autism and their families, and I ask members for their support in agreeing the general principles of this important bill this afternoon.
I call on the Chair of the Health and Social Care Committee, Lloyd.
Diolch yn fawr, Deputy Llywydd. Cafodd y bil ei gyfeirio at y Pwyllgor Iechyd ar gyfer gwaith craffu cyfnod 1. Fel rhan o hyn, cawsom ystod eang o dystiolaeth. Yn ychwanegol at y gwaith casglu tystiolaeth ffurfiol arferol o'n wneud yng nghyfarfodydd y Pwyllgor, ymgynghorwyd â phobl efo anhwylder spectrum awtistiaeth a'i teuluodd mewn cyfres o weithdai a gafodd ei trefnu gan dîm allgymorth y Cynulliad dros yr haf. Cyfarfu aelodau'r Pwyllgor hefyd efo cynrychiolwyr rhieni ac ymweld ag Autism Spectrum Connections Cymru, siop un stop sy'n darparu lle diogel i oedolion sydd efo cyflwr spectrum awtistiaeth i gael mynediad at ystod eang o gymorth o gyngor a chymorth i siarad gyda defnyddwyr gwasanaeth. Hoffwn ddiolch i bawb y gyfrannodd at y gwaith yma. Mae awtistiaeth yn gyflwr gydol oes fel dim arall. Da ni wedi siarad efo pobl gydag awtistiaeth a'i teuluodd sy'n cael trafferth ac sy'n dweud bod nhw wedi aros ddeng mlynedd am y strategaeth awtistiaeth i ddarparu'r gefnogaeth sydd ei hangen arnyn nhw, ac nad yw wedi digwydd. Mae'r Pwyllgor yn deall rhesymeg yr aelod sy'n gyfrifol wrth gyflwyno'r bil yma ac yn cytuno'n llwyr efo'r angen am welliannau yn y ddarpariaeth o wasanaethau bobl sydd efo'r anhwylder. Da ni wedi gwrando ar bobl sydd ar anhwylder a'i teuluoedd, a da ni wedi hargyhoeddi bod angen gwneud lawer mwy yn y maes hwn, yn enwedig o ran mynediad at wasanaethau cymorth. Mae'r anawsterau presennol am mae pobl efo awtistiaeth a'i teuluoedd yn ei wynebu'n gyson wrth geisio cael cymorth yn anerbyniol, ac mae'n rhaid mynd i'r afal yn nhw. Y neges y ddaeth yn amlwg yn ein tystiolaeth yw bod angen mwy o wasanaethau cymorth ar frys i bobl sydd efo'r anhwylder. Un maes o bryder penodol oedd darparu gwasanaethau ar gyfer pobl sydd ag anhwylder spectrum awtistiaeth ac sydd ag IQ uchel a heb anabledd dysgu neu gyflwr iechyd meddwl yr ymddengys eu bod nhw'n disgyn drwy'r bwlch. Dywedodd Llywodraeth Cymru wrthym fod ganddi'r holl bwerus sydd ei hangen arni i sicrhau gwelliannau i wasanaethau awtistiaeth yn y dderwriaeth gyfredol yn nedd gwasanaethau cymdeithasol a llesiant, deddf anghenion dysgu ychwanegol a'r Tribwnus Addysg a deddf Gwasanaeth Iechyd Cymru 2006. Fodd bynnag, dywedodd y rhieni a gymerodd ran yn ein grwpiau ffocws wrthym fod y ddeddf Gwasanaethau Cymdeithasol yn methu a sicrhau canlyniadau gwell ar gyfer eu plant, am nad yw'r asesiadau briodol ar gyfer bobl sydd efo'r anhwylder, ac felly maen nhw'n aml yn methu a chael gofal a chefnogaeth.
Byddwch chi'n cymryd byddwch chi'n cytuno gyda fi bod rai pobl yn ein rhanbarth ni wedi gorfod teithio i llefydd fel Norwich mwyn cael cymorth preifat oherwydd bod nhw'n aros mor hir am asesiadau. Tysa yna bil o'r fath sydd yn cael ei gyflwyno yma heddiw, bydde modd i sicrhau bod nhw'n cael y triniaeth yn gynharach ac bod nhw'n cael asesiad yn gynharach a bod hynny yn rhoi rhyw fath o gobeith i'r teuluoedd sydd yn dioddef ar hyn o bryd.
Diolch yn fawr, Bethan, a mi fyswn ni'n cytuno. A dyna'r fath o dystiolaeth oedden ni'n cael drosodd a throsodd drwy'r ymgynghoriad yma wrth i ni graffu. Dywedodd y rhieni wrthym nad yw'r holl bobl uchel weithredol sydd efo'r anhwylder yn gymwys am wasanaethau cymdeithasol o dan y ddeddf, ac bod ganddyn nhw IQ uchel, efallai bydden nhw'n cael anhawster mawr wrth wneud tasgau dyddiol. Dywedodd oedolion sydd awtistiaeth a gymerodd ran yn ymweliad y Pwyllgor ag Autism Spectrum Connections Cymru ym Manghaerdydd wrthym eu bod nhw'n teimlo eu bod yn grŵp anweledig yn y gymuned awtistiaeth gan nad oedden nhw'n perthyn i'r categori plant, nac oedolion sydd angen gofal o ddydd i ddydd ac nad ydyn nhw'n effeithio ar ystadegau cyflogadwyedd ac anabledd. Clywsom eu bod yn awyddus i weithio, ond yn methu a cael swydd ac mae angen cymorth arnyn nhw i'w helpu i gael gwaith. Nid ydym ni, fel Pwyllgor, wedi gallu dod i gonsensws ynghylch ar derfwriaeth hon, ar yr adeg benodol hon, yw'r ffordd fwyaf priodol o gyflawni'r gwelliannau sydd ddirfawr eu hangen. Mae rhai aelodau yn cefnogi'r cyflwyno'r bil yma nawr, gan gredu ei bod yn amserol ac yn angenrheidiol rhoi gwasanaethau ar sail statudol i gyflawni gwelliant lle mae strategaethau blaenorol wedi methu a gwneud hynny a sicrhau newid sy'n ofynnol i bobl sydd ag anhwylder spectrum awtistiaeth a'i teuluoedd. Mae aelodau eraill o'r fan bod angen rhoi mwy o amser i fentrau a deddfwriaeth bresennol ddod i rym. Roedd rhai hefyd yn pryderu ynghylch ffocws y bil, y mae rhai o'r fan ei fod ar ddiagnosis yn hytrach nag ar sail anghenion, a'r canlyniadau posib ar bobl na fydden nhw'n derbyn diagnosis ar gyfer anhwylder spectrwm awtistiaeth neu sydd â chyflyrau niwrolegol eraill. Fodd bynnag, da ni'n cytuno bod angen pwysig i wella gwasanaethau cymorth i bobl sydd ag anhwylder spectrwm awtistiaeth a'i teuluoedd ledled Cymru, a chredwn fod yn rhaid mynd i'r afael â hyn fel mater o flaenoriaeth. I'r perwl yma, da ni wedi gwneud cyfres o argymhellion i Lywodraeth Cymru gyda'r bwriad o ddatblygu'r gwelliannau hyn. Mae hain yn cynnwys cynyddu'r ddarpariaeth o wasanaethau cymorth anhwylder spectrwm awtistiaeth uniongyrchol ledled Cymru, y tu hwnt i'r gwasanaethau a gynigir ar hyn o bryd, gan y gwasanaeth awtistiaeth integredig, ac yn sicrhau bod gwasanaethau'r trydydd sector yn derbyn cyllid cynaliadwy mwyn gallu parhau efo'r gwasanaethau cymorth arbenigol i bobl sydd ag anhwylder spectrwm awtistiaeth a'i hehangu. Yn ail, rhoi cyfarwyddyd i'r gwasanaeth awtistiaeth integredig i wella cysondeb y gwasanaethau ar draws yr rhanbarthau mwyn sicrhau dull gweithredu cenedlaethol. Cymryd camau arfyrder i fynd i'r afael ar angen clir am gymorth cyflogaeth ar gyfer oedolion sydd ag anhwylder spectrwm awtistiaeth. Nesaf, rhoi cyfarwyddyd i fyrddau iechyd ac awdurdodau lleol i sicrhau bod nifer o lwybrau atgyfeirio priodol a chlir ar gael i bawb, gan gynnwys llwybr gofal sylfaenol penodol, a bod y rhwystrau sy'n bodoli rhwng y sectorau iechyd, sector gofal, sector addysg yn cael ei rhoi o'r neilltu. Enghraifft, mwyn galluogi meddygon teulu i allu atgyfeirio plant i gael cymorth addysgol. Gofyniad gorfodol i bob aelod o staff mewn ysgolion, yn enwedig athrawon a chynrychiolwyr addysg, gael hyfforddiant mewn ymwybyddiaeth a dealltwriaeth o anhwylder spectrwm awtistiaeth yn ystod ei hyfforddiant cychwynnol athrawon, ac fel rhan o'i datblygiad proffesiynol parhaus. Gwnaethom hefyd argymhelliad i'r aelod sy'n gyfrifol, fel da ni wedi clywed pe ba'r bil yn mynd ymlaen i gyfnod 2 y dylu cyflwyno gwelliant i sicrhau nad adolygiad barnwrol yw'r unig ffordd sydd ar gael i unigolion fyny eu hawliau. Noda fod yr aelod sy'n gyfrifol yn derbyn yr egwyddor y tu ôl i'r argymhelliad hwn, ond nid yw wedi gallu nodi ateb ymarferol i fynd i'r afael ar mater. Mae hyn yn siomedig, ond gwellu deall y rhesymau. A mae fod wedi dod o ganlyniad i'n sgyrsiau gyda rhieni a soniodd wrthym a mae pryder ynghylch ei gallu i gael atebion priodol pan fo angen o ystyried cymlethdod proses yr adolygiad barnwrol. Nid ydym eto, fel pwyllgor, wedi cael ymateb ffurfiol gan Lywodraeth Cymru un hargymhellion, ac rwy'n edrych ymlaen at glywed gan y gweinidog yn ddiweddarach yn y ddadl hon. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you. Can I call on the Chair of the Finance Committee, Lle Griffith?
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Dirprwy Llywydd. Dwi'n falch iawn i gael cyfrannu at ddadl cyfnod 1 yma mewn perthynas a goblygiadau ariannol y bil awtistiaeth Cymru. Nawr, ar yr achlysur hwn, doedd dim modd i'r pwyllgor ddod i unrhyw gasgliad ar ddilysrwydd yr asesiad effaith rheoleiddiol. Dyw hon ddim yn safbwynt y bod pwyllgor am ei chymryd, gan wrth gwrs nad yw e'n helpu aelodau'r cynulliad i graffu ar y ddeddfwriaeth dan sylw. Yn ystod ein sesiynau tystiolaeth, mi ddaeth i'r amlwg nad oedd Llywodraeth Cymru wedi darparu manylion unrhyw gostau sy'n gysylltiedig a darparu'r gwasanaethau presennol i'r aelod sy'n gyfrifol am y bil. Yn sgil hynny, ni chafodd y pwyllgor gyfle i drafod gwertham arian opsiynau 1 a 2 yn llawn, gan doedd llawer o wybodaeth ar gael am gostau cyfredol Llywodraeth Cymru i liwio trafodaethau o'r fath. Mae'n ddyletswydd ar y Llywodraeth fel prif ffynhonnell y wybodaeth ariannol i ymgysylltu â'r broses hon, ac mae ganddo ni bryderon sylweddol ynglŷn â diffyg ymgysylltu Llywodraeth Cymru yn yr achos hwn. Nawr fe roddwyd cryn sylw i'r honiad mae cyfrifoldeb yr aelod sy'n gyfrifol i'w cynhyrchu'r asesiad effaith rheoleiddiol a darparu costau ar ei gyfer ond mae gan y Llywodraeth gyfrifoldeb hefyd i ymgysylltu ac i gydweithio'n llawn ar broses yma. Nawr, mae'n profiad ni ar yr achlysur hwn yn awgrymu nad yw hyn wedi digwydd. Mi ddaeth ysgrifennydd y Cabinet, fel oedd ei deitlau ar y pryd, i sesiwn dystiolaeth gan gwestiynu nifer o'r ffigurau yn yr asesiad effaith rheoleiddiol. Fodd bynnag, ni chawson ni wybod am ei bryderon tan y cyfarfod hwnnw, ac roedd yr ysgrifennydd Cabinet yn amharod i ddarparu tystiolaeth ysgrifenedig, yn cynnwys manylion am ei bryderon ynghylch y costau yn yr asesiad effaith rheoleiddiol. Felly cyfyngwyd ar allu'r pwyllgor i gwestiynu ac i graffu ar y tybiaethau yn yr asesiad effaith rheoleiddiol. Yn ystod ein sesiynau tystiolaeth, mi ddath i'r amlwg nad oedd eglurder ynghylch gwariant penodol y Llywodraeth ar anhwylder sbectrwm awtistiaeth o fewn y darlun ehangach o wariant ar gyflyrau datblygu niwrolegol. Mae'r diffyg gwybodaeth hwn yn peri pryder i'r Pwyllgor, sut y gallwn ni ystyried effeithiolrwydd un o bolisïau'r Llywodraeth heb wybod faint o arian sydd wedi'i wario arno fe. Mae Llywodraeth Cymru wedi awgrymu bod ei gynllun strategol diwygiedig ar ESD yn cwmpasu pob un o rannau allweddol y bil hwn, ac eto nid oes ganddi unrhyw wybodaeth ariannol am yr hyn sy'n cael ei wario yn y maes yma. Roedd y diffyg wybodaeth a'r diffyg ymgysylltu hwn yn golygu ei bod hi'n anodd i'r Pwyllgor ddod i unrhyw gasgliadau. Enghraifft, roedden ni'n ansicr a oedd y galw ychwanegol posib am adnoddau all ddeillio o ddill gweithredu diagnosis wedi adlewyrchu'n llawn yn yr asesiad effaith rheoleiddiol. Fodd bynnag, nid oedd modd i ni brofi'r ansicrwydd hwn yn sgil diffyg gwybodaeth glir am yr arian sy'n cael ei wario ar wasanaethau ESD. Felly ar yr achlysur yma, dyw'r Pwyllgor ddim yn gallu gwneud penderfyniad ar ddilysrwydd yr asesiad effaith rheoleiddiol hwn. Dyw'r aelodau ddim wedi cael unrhyw reswm ariannol sylweddol i ddeddfwriaeth beidio a symud yn ei blaen, ond dyn ni ddim wedi gallu pennu a oes unrhyw werth am arian yn y ddeddfwriaeth hon yn sgil y diffyg gwybodaeth ariannol. Nawr mae llwyddiant deddfwriaeth yn dibynnu ar wybodaeth gywir, ac roedd methu a darparu'r wybodaeth ar yr achlysur hwn wedi rhwystro y broses graffu. Rwy'n ni'n credu bod hwn yn gynsail sy'n peri pryder, ac yn gynsail na ddylid i ailadrodd, ac mi fydden ni'n annog y Llywodraeth os yw o'r farn i bod yn briodol pleidleisio o blaid caniatáu i fel aelod symud yn ei flaen ar y cam caniatâd i fwrw ymlaen yn i'w leave to proceed, mi ddylen nhw sicrhau i bod nhw'n barod i ymgysylltu'n llawn ar aelod sy'n gyfrifol. Gall beidio gwneud hynny arwen at waith craffu gwael, gall arwen at ddefnydd gwael o amser cynulliad ac yn wir adnoddau'r cynulliad, ac yn bwysicaf oll, wrth gwrs, gall arwen at anhegwch i'r anddeiliad sydd â diddordeb dilys a gwirioneddol yn y pwnc sydd o dan sylw.
Call on the Chair of the Constitutional Legislative Affairs Committee, Mick Anthony.
Dr. Crojowydd. This is a report of the Constitutional Legislative Affairs Committee. We reported on the Autism Wales Bill on the 7th of December, and we made 6 recommendations. I'm pleased to note that the member in charge has accepted all our recommendations, and should the bill proceed to stage 2, we look forward to seeing the necessary amendments tabled. My contribution this afternoon will focus on 2 of our recommendations, recommendations 3 and 5. The first of these, we are concerned that in the absence of enforcement provisions within the bill, the only potential remedy available would appear to be an action to seek judicial review, which we believe is unsatisfactory because of its complexity, high cost and potential for delays. Our recommendation 3 suggested the member in charge should reconsider whether the remedies available to citizens under the bill are appropriate and, if necessary, table amendments at stage 2 to provide a more effective way of enforcing the bill's provisions. I note the member in charge has said that at present time he has been unable to identify a meaningful way of amending the bill in this respect. However, I welcome his commitment to work with members and other experts with the aim of strengthening available remedies under the bill should it proceed to the next stage. However, this remains an important area of concern to the committee and a weakness to the bill in its current form. Moving on, the power to amend the definition of autism spectrum disorder in section 9 to include other neurodevelopmental orders is exceptionally broad. We are concerned at this approach for a number of reasons. It is clear from the member in charge explanatory memorandum that a considerable amount of thought and research has gone into preparing a bill that relates solely to autism. However, the bill permits subordinate legislation to be used to extend the bill's provisions to other unspecified neurodevelopmental disorders, a term that itself is not defined in the bill, without the guarantee of that legislation being accompanied by the same level of supporting evidence and analysis. If the bill was enacted, it could, if the powers in section 9(1) were used, become an Autism Act that applies to a range of neurodevelopmental orders and not just autism. This has the potential to cause confusion. Furthermore, it would mean that subordinate legislation related to other neurodevelopmental disorders would not be subject to the same level of scrutiny as the autism bill. Rather, as a piece of subordinate legislation, the widening of the enacted legislation's application would be subject to a take-it-or-leave-it vote with no opportunity to amend that legislation. We do not believe that, given the breadth of the power, that even the application of a supra-affirmative procedure would overcome our concerns. In our view, the approach in the bill does not amount to good legislative practice and would not lead to good law. For that reason, our recommendation 5 suggested that if the bill proceeds to the next stage, the member in charge should table an amendment to section 9(1) of the bill to remove paragraph B of the definition of autism spectrum disorder. In reaching this view, we acknowledge that the provisions were included on the basis of consultation responses received by the member in charge. However, in our view, the appropriate way to have achieved this would have been to introduce a bill related to neurodevelopmental orders generally. However, we also recognise that this would have been outside the terms of the member in charge's original ballot proposal, and his ability to do this was restricted. It is therefore of concern this therefore appears as part of the bill. I note and welcome that the member in charge has accepted our conclusions and recommendations on this matter. Thank you, Deputy Llywydd.
Thank you. Can I now call the Minister for Health and Social Services, Vaughan Gethin.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I want to say at the outset that everyone in this chamber wants to improve outcomes and the quality of life for autistic people and their families. And I agree that support for autistic people needs to be better. That support is not yet consistently available, and for some families it does feel like a fight to get the right support and a system that works against them. Many, if not all of us across this chamber, would have heard this experience directly from our constituents. We'll recognise the impact that this can have on families that we have been elected to serve. And more than that, there are a number of people across this chamber who recognise that experience from within our own families. There are real, legitimate and serious concerns that I and the government take seriously and are committed to addressing. That is why this government has invested significantly and will continue to invest in new services. The difference in this chamber is not whether we should improve services to make a real difference to the lived experience of autistic people and their families. The difference is how we make that difference. And I would like to thank the Health and Social Care and Sport Committee, the Constitutional Affairs and Legislative Affairs Committee and the Finance Committee for bringing together a wide range of views as they scrutinised the legislation. The committee reports demonstrate a wide consensus in seeking to make improvements in our autism services. None of the Assembly Committee reports make a positive recommendation that the bill should proceed. We believe that we have all the legislative powers that we need to deliver the required improvements in autism services, and we are delivering on our commitments set out in the autism strategy. If the improvements that we're committed to make are not realised, then the door is, of course, open to future legislation, if that would make the difference that we all want to see.
You might be factually correct when you just said that none of the committee recommendations were that the bill should proceed. But the Chair of the Finance Committee has eloquently said in his contribution earlier that we as a committee were unable to decide one way or the other. So we didn't reject the bill either. We simply said we didn't have enough costings provided to us, mainly from the Welsh Government, for it to proceed.
I'll come to that point. It's a point of dispute between the Government and the Finance Committee on that provision of information. I won't make some progress before I take further interventions. We have begun a series of reforms to make services more responsive to the individual needs of autistic people and their families. The clear majority of clinicians, professional groups, the NHS and local government who gave evidence to the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee believe that the reforms that we have introduced need the opportunity to work and be evaluated. That was also the view of some members of the committee in their report. I believe that our focus now must be on meeting the commitments that we have made to complete the rollout of the Integrated Autism Service by the end of this financial year, to finalise a statutory code that will set new standards of care and services, and our commitment to evaluating and learning from what we have done to date. What I've written to members this week, setting out a range of our commitments to improvement and evaluation. And we do recognise the call for greater consistency made by the Health Committee, and we are committed to do just that. But our commitment to improve will not end at voting time today. This is a commitment to the future, and I fully expect the government to be held account to meet those commitments. The alternative we have before us today is legislation which, despite its intent, has a potential to do harm, not good. If this bill were to progress today, work on the statutory code would have to slow down, as officials would need to concentrate on the bill instead. And the consultation on that statutory code is open until the 1st of March. And I would encourage all people to have their say, including the points made by the member in charge during his opening. We believe the code will address many of the core issues identified in the bill, including statutory service standards and levels of support that people can expect to receive. It is also written in plain and accessible language that we cannot achieve in legislation, and the code would of course be in place more quickly than the measures suggested in the bill. It is my expectation, subject to consultation responses, that that code will be enforced before the end of this calendar year.
Thank you, Minister, very much for taking the intervention there. I mean, what I've just heard is about aspiration, and you've said that if your reforms don't work, you'll consider legislation, but you need to see if the work you're doing now embeds. Yet you introduced the minimum alcohol pricing bill and insisted it was necessary, that legislation was necessary, without any evidence to back up its necessity at all. Why a different set of rules for this from your own legislation?
I completely reject the comparison. They're entirely different issues. The public health measures we can take with the Minimum Unit Pricing Act have been supported by a range of evidence we put before committees, and indeed the purpose and point of that bill was supported by committees in this Assembly during their scrutiny. But if this bill is passed, we do risk concentrating our clinical resources on diagnosis rather than ongoing support services. The Children's Commissioner, the Royal Colleges for GPs, nursing, speech and language therapy, psychiatry, paediatrics and child health and occupational therapy, the NHS Confederation and the Welsh Government Association all recognise the need for further consistency and improvement. They were also all united that this bill is not the right way to do so. I'll take a further intervention if I'm to be allowed time.
Just very briefly, Minister, I think you're misrepresenting the position of the Children's Commissioner. What she has said, it is a matter of debate, and I have her response here in front of me. It is a matter of debate as whether legislation is required. I fully acknowledge that you're accurate in your representation of the other bodies you mentioned, but I think you should revise what you've said about the Children's Commissioner.
I think you'll also find the Children's Commissioner also referred to the risk that having a diagnosis-led approach would be seen as a golden ticket to services. The 6 Royal Colleges were clear that services should be provided on the basis of need, not diagnosis. They also said that specialist practitioners needed to deliver the bill scheme would be difficult to recruit, irrespective of whether additional funds are made available. And the evidence to the Health Committee suggests that the bill would result in funding and staff resources being diverted to address waiting list initiatives and away from providing much-needed post-diagnostic care for children, adults, parents and carers. And, of course, the same staff are typically engaged in providing care that meets the needs of people who are not diagnosed with a condition or who do have a diagnosis for a different neurodevelopmental condition. And representatives of other neurodevelopmental conditions are worried about the adverse impact on services if autism-only legislation is introduced at the expense of wider service provision. That point was made clear both by clinicians and ADHD representatives who gave evidence to the Health Committee. Now, the Finance Committee were unable to reach a view on whether the bill delivers value for money, and they laid the blame largely at our door, and we dispute that in the strongest possible terms. We cannot provide information that we do not hold, and it is not the government's job to do the work of the member in charge in seeking to prove the merits of his proposal. As a backbencher, I've cooperated myself in actually working on a new piece of work to understand the financial impact of that bill. I have met people with autism and their families and carers who support the approach that we're taking as a government. It is not the case that all autistic people and their families support this bill, and my own in-tray bears that point out. But the Welsh Government will continue to listen and act on the feedback and the evaluation of the measures that we are taking. We're committed to delivering the improvements that we need by strengthening existing needs-based legislation. And I want to close by again saying there is agreement in this chamber with the member in charge and across parties about the need to improve services for autistic people. And this government is investing in long-term improvement, but there is still disagreement about the means. It is the view of health and care professionals working with and for autistic people that the bill would have unwelcome and unintended consequences. That does include the likely redirection of resources that would reduce, not improve, care and support for autistic people and other people with neurodevelopmental conditions. And we share that assessment. We do not believe that this bill will bring about the long-term improvement in services and outcomes that we all want to see. So I ask members to support our drive for service improvement in the next phase of reform, which includes a statutory code. This is a difficult choice for members to make, but I genuinely believe that the bill will not deliver against the hopes and aspirations that so many have for it. I accept that other members will not share my view. Whatever the outcome of today's vote, I give my commitment once again to work with people across the chamber and outside it to make a real and positive difference with and for autistic people right across the country.
Thank you. Mark Ishwood.
At a meeting of the Cross-Party Autism Group in November 2014, members of the autism community from across Wales told us that the Welsh Government's autism strategy was not delivering and people were being pushed further into crisis. The meeting voted unanimously for an Autism Act. On January the 21st, 2015, I led an individual members' debate here which called on the Welsh Government to introduce an Autism Act for Wales. Members voted in favour. In October 2016, I led a debate calling on the Welsh Government to bring forward an Autism Wales bill during this Assembly term. This was defeated on whipped party lines. I was therefore delighted when my colleague Paul Davies brought forward proposals for this member-proposed bill. Autism must have a statutory identity in Wales, with specific duties placed, amongst others, on local authorities and health boards. Reliance on the Welsh Government's revised ASD Action Plan and integrated autism service otherwise promises more of the same. Every single day, I and my office are contacted by autistic people or their family members in crisis because public service providers don't understand or don't want to understand what autism is, despite going on the training course. We're constantly having to advise public service providers, including the Integrated Autism Service, on how things need to be done differently with autistic people. As guidance from the Inns of Court states, in order for people with autism to communicate effectively, there must be early identification of their needs, the acquisition of comprehensive background information about the individual, careful consideration given to the communication environment, appropriate preparation of the individual for what is expected, and a planned and flexible approach taken. They add consideration must be given not just to the types of questions asked, but also to the manner of how this is done. Timings, changes to scheduling and environmental factors such as busy buildings are all likely to affect the overall quality of a person's evidence. It is therefore incumbent on public services to establish and adjust to an autistic person's social and communication needs, recognise the causes of an autistic person's heightened anxiety and therefore avoid treating the autistic person as the problem, which is happening every day as we debate this, as we move forward. As we heard from autism advocate the Agony Auti at the last meeting of the Cross-Party Autism Group, there is too much focus on interventions based on behaviour, not what is driving this behaviour. The first thing to ask is, are they in pain? As the National Autistic Society states, it has become clear that the picture painted by Welsh Government and some professional bodies, such as the Royal Colleges, differs significantly to the lived experiences of autistic people and their families. This goes for the WLGA too. As the parent of people with neurodiverse and sensory loss conditions, I am not calling for condition-specific legislation for them, because they do not suffer the degree of discrimination, trauma and torture too often suffered by autistic people today. As the mother of an autistic son who committed suicide in 2018 told me, he appeared just a quiet, bright young man. They don't see the struggle these kids go through every day to survive in a neurotypical world. Typical of many, a mother told me that her 13-year-old daughter had been out of education for 4 years due to lack of knowledge and understanding of autism. Another told me that her autistic daughter is 240 miles away in a mental health hospital as a result of years of anxiety due to a lack of understanding. Another, that early recognition of autism is vital. My 11-year-old son, she said, never received early intervention and will have a much harder life in consequence. Others stated, for example, that being autistic is like being a non-person, that people on the autism spectrum have a huge contribution to make to society, but not when they're floundering without proper understanding, support and opportunities. And that as a parent of an autistic child and as a professional school nurse, it is fair to say that services for autistic people are sadly lacking. Last April, I hosted and spoke at the Going Gold for Autistic Acceptance event in the Assembly, at which autistic adults put forward ideas of how we can all work together co-productively to ensure that we begin to tackle the discrimination against autistic people that has become, quote, the norm rather than the exception. Only a very arrogant politician would think they understand the needs of autistic people better than autistic people themselves.
I will make the plea again that I have a lot of speakers, and even a 8-minute over the timescale means that you're cutting somebody else out. Hevin David.
I'd like to very quickly, Llywydd, acknowledge Stephen Lewis's empty seat. I didn't have the chance yesterday, and I will miss him immeasurably. I'd like to share with you, Llywydd, some of the questions that a parent of a child with autism has. These questions may be, will she be able to remain in her school? How can I help her overcome her frustrations at not being able to tell me what she wants? Will we ever be able to hold a conversation? How can we possibly approach toilet training if she doesn't understand the concept? Who can teach me how to help her? Will she ever be able to tell me that she loves me? I tell her every day. These are just some of the questions that a parent has. And Llywydd, I am that parent, and I declare an interest in this debate. My decision on how I vote today will not be influenced by the voting advice I received from the government. I said to the Chief Whip some time ago that if, after much thought and discussion with stakeholders, I felt that this bill was appropriate, I would support its movement to Stage 2. Every time we vote in this chamber, we do so in order to make better the lives of those people we represent. My personal interest does not outweigh that consideration, but it does inform it. In the course of my consideration, I've held discussions with the Minister, who has been very kind to meet me twice, with Paul Davies, AM, with NAS Cymru, with the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board specialists, with constituents affected by autism, and with senior staff at Trinity Fields Special School, on which I'm a governor. I've considered the bill in detail, as well as all of the committee reports. Following these discussions, on balance, I find this bill, as presented at this time, is not one I can support. And that is a decision that I've made based on very great, in-detail, in-depth consideration. I'd like to share with you a letter from someone I respect very much.
Thank you very much for taking the intervention, and this is a really important contribution. Have you considered whether amendments at Stage 2 could resolve the concerns that you have?
I've considered whether amendments would be effective, and I don't think, given the assurance that we've had from the Health Minister, that should a bill be needed in the future, given the action that's been taken by the government, then I think it's appropriate that we don't move this bill to Stage 2, given the amount of time then amendments would take. I don't accept that, telling me shame, when I've got personal experience of this. I think it's inappropriate to say that. I'd like to share with you a letter from Ian Elliott, who's the head teacher of Trinity Fields School, and Michelle Fitton, who's assistant head teacher and lead for the very well-respected, recommended Caerphilly Autistic Spectrum Service. These are people I respect immeasurably, and they have raised the concerns that have been raised in the committee evidence that's been received. They believe that the bill relies with too little emphasis on the views of children and young people, in line with the Welsh Government's commitment to the UNCRC. And they say, in a letter to me yesterday, perhaps the focus should be on developing the code of practice for autism and ensuring resources promote the delivery of services for those individuals with ASD alongside the ALN Act. and they therefore recommend not to proceed with the bill. The Aneurin Bevan Health Board have written to me and they say that we would like to re-emphasise concerns regarding specific legislation. These are concerns that the wider definition of ASD used within the proposals will not be agile or flexible enough to reflect and respond to ever-growing understanding of neurodisabilities. As new classifications emerge from the legislation, would need to be regularly amended to reflect these understandings. Therefore, it's suggested that this reinforces the suggestion that any protection, however welcome for ASD, should be on the basis of need, not diagnosis or condition. There are a myriad of symptoms that people with autistic spectrum condition demonstrate. And the fact that no two people are exactly alike makes it incredibly difficult to produce a piece of workable legislation. I am always working on behalf of those with autism and autism caring responsibilities, and I would like to urge the Minister to see this call for this bill to be a call for action from people who are affected by autism. I'm reassured by his letter yesterday, which outlined ongoing comprehensive action he's taken, and I'm reassured by his speech he's made today. For my own part, while I await a diagnosis for my daughter, I can only praise the specialist support for my daughter's speech and language development that she's received, though we as parents had to fight for it. I also welcome the Cruise into Communication course I attended as a parent, which has enabled me to develop visual communication with my daughter. But it is the case that many questions and much uncertainties remain for me and for my family. I don't know what the future holds and what the next steps are, but I'm as confident as I can be that the Government is taking action to provide more help for all of us who are affected by autism and its attendant needs.
Thank you. Helen Mary Jones.
Thank you, Deputy Llywydd. I have to say, as a member of the Health Committee, I went into this process feeling that I had some awareness of the issues, but I was far from convinced that legislation was the answer. And through the process of receiving evidence, I have changed my mind. I've been thoroughly disheartened and actually sometimes quite distressed by the evidence we received from people with autism and their families, of the challenges they face to get some kind of diagnosis, of identifying support where support is needed, where it exists at all, of getting access to their support. Some of those stories were heartbreaking, and in some places, I'm afraid in Wales, some places services for those young people particularly are scarcely better than they were when I was a special needs teacher in the 1980s. There's a shocking lack of consistency nationally, and where things are good, they are too often dependent on skilled and caring individuals in certain professions. I think it's clear from the debate today that we can all agree that this can't be allowed to continue and that something must be done. So why am I convinced that we need a law? Now, it is true that the evidence received by our committee was mixed and the division has been summarised by others. Broadly, those providing services or responsible for providing services are against legislating. Their concerns are reflected in the report. I won't try to answer all their points, but I would say this. It is clear that the Social Services and Wellbeing Act does not provide an adequate legal framework for the provision of services for all people with autism. The concerns raised about resourcing are genuine, of course, but they need to be addressed. But this is part of a wider debate about resourcing care and support for all people who need it, and is not a reason either not to legislate or to legislate. And of course, generally speaking, providers of service rarely wish to see their services subject to more legislation than they think is necessary. I'm happy to.
Just from my background, can I just say, as a GP, when often faced with a patient there is no service, and it is dependent on the diagnosis, there isn't a unanimity of professional opinion either, and I support an autism bill.
I'm grateful for your intervention, Diane, and as do I, of course. Now, on the other side of this debate, we have the people with autism and their families and the organisations which represent them. Through this process, I personally heard no voices from this group opposing legislation, though I fully accept that that can't possibly cover the view, and I have heard, of course, and listened very carefully to what Kevin David has had to say. Though, of course, many family members were clear that legislation alone wouldn't be enough. They described, as I've said, the huge challenges faced by accessing services. And I was particularly struck by parents who had contributed to previous consultations, who had sat on national and local working groups, contributed hundreds of hours of free advice and support. and then to hear from them that, from their perception, nothing has changed, and they don't believe that without legal force anything will. And I have to tell the Minister that these families feel they have heard this all before. Now, the government position I want to refer to briefly is odd, to say the least. On the one hand, the Minister says that a diagnosis is not needed, and the Social Services and Wellbeing Act sets out how support should be provided for people based on need without a formal diagnosis, and I would absolutely support that position, but all the evidence we received on the Health Committee is that that is not the case, and particularly for children with autism, without a diagnosis, nothing happens. This is just not happening, and even if it was, some of the people with autism will never meet the thresholds for the kind of support that Act is designed for. Now, the Minister says that condition-specific legislation is unhelpful and isn't needed, yet at the same time he proposes to bring forward a condition-specific statutory code. Now, Deputy Presiding Officer, this makes no sense at all. I'm quite used to getting mixed messages from this government, but it isn't often that they actually openly contradict themselves, as the Minister did in one of our meetings. The families do not believe, on the whole, that a code is enough. Is this legislation perfect? Well, possibly it is not, and the member bringing it forward has acknowledged this. There are concerns about the difficulty of enforcing rights, and I know that he's agreed to look at this. There may be an overemphasis on assessment and diagnosis rather than the statutory right to receive services. Again, the sponsoring member has made clear that he is happy to work with others to address this through the next stage of the process. Like the families, I'm afraid I am not convinced, having been through the previous process of creating the strategy, that anything short of legislation is going to get for these fellow citizens what they deserve. And on that basis, and on behalf of the people with autism and their families, including those in the gallery here today, I commend this motion to the Senedd. Let's allow this legislation to go to the next stage.
Michelle Brown.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'd like to thank Paul Davies for introducing this bill. I'm in complete support of this bill and agree with everything that's been said so far in support of it, so I'll try not to repeat the points already made. But turning to one of the representations we've had against the bill, I'm sure that everyone here has received the email about the bill authored by a number of clinicians concerned that if this bill goes through, focus will be taken off conditions that, while every bit as impacted for the sufferers ASD, have not secured a diagnosis of ASD and therefore aren't subject to this bill and the targets or accountability that the bill were introduced. To those clinicians, I'd reply that if the Welsh Labour NHS fails to meet the needs of children who aren't diagnosed with ASD, it won't be the fault of the bill. The blame will lie with the government, whose successive failures so far have necessitated this bill. I understand the concerns the clinicians have raised regarding possible unintended consequences of the bill, and it's something that you always have to watch, obviously. But the well-intentioned contribution to this debate may in fact act to let the government off the hook for the mismanagement of the Welsh NHS. It would be in the hands of the Labour government whether children with other needs would be ignored. This bill won't cause anyone to be ignored, it's just Labour's running of the Welsh NHS that will cause that. We can't vote against this bill because we fear that the government aren't competent enough to deal with it. The people of Wales need government incompetence to be highlighted and challenged, not accommodated and appeased. So, with all due respect to the clinicians who've highlighted their concerns, I fear that following their advice will only make the Welsh Government feel better, not those people with ASD whose needs have been neglected for far too long. We all wish this bill wasn't necessary. We all wish the NHS was meeting the needs of those with ASD, but we also know that this isn't the case. Saying let's not do anything about it because there are other shortcomings that also need dealing with, that this diagnosis versus need argument, it's not good enough. And should we feel the need to bring in additional bills to tackle the shortcomings of the Labour-run NHS, we should do so. Not to refuse to tackle a problem solely on the grounds that it's not dealing with all of the NHS's ills is like a doctor refusing to treat a patient's long-standing symptoms until a cure for the underlying disease is found. We can't let those with ASD suffer any longer while a cure for Labour's incompetent running of the NHS is found. So I urge all members to vote for this bill. But turning to the second point that those clinicians made, Nowhere is it more evidence that the NHS is failing families in need than in the second point that they raise, when they say that there's a risk that individuals or families will feel that their best opportunity to access the support they need is by securing that particular diagnosis, i.e. ASD. Were the NHS and support service running as they should, this wouldn't be an issue. But the fact that it is an issue doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything. As the Betsy Cadwallader fiasco shows, not only can the government not run the NHS at a strategic level, but they can't do it at a direct level either. So these, that view is backed up by the email that we've had from the clinicians. So really, the one and only reason this bill is needed is because Labour government has failed to convince the Welsh NHS and other organisations to deliver the support and services needed by those with ASD. We know there are other individuals, groups of people and communities that are currently being let down by the Welsh Labour government. But today we're dealing with ASD, and in order to get those living with ASD the support they need, I urge everyone to back this bill today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Hedges.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Parents of children with autism I talk to feel they are not getting the support they need. Although those with children who attend Pen y Bryn, which is an exceptionally good school in my constituency, speak highly of the school. I have no doubt that the current bill is flawed. However, something has got to be done. The Welsh Government has started a number of initiatives, and there is an argument to await their appraisal. What I want the Minister to say unequivocally to me today, for me to not vote for this bill, is that if the appraisal finds that these initiatives that the Government have brought forward are not working, then the Government will introduce its own bill during this Assembly term. I think we need to ensure that what is needed for the people is brought forward, and that a bill produced by the Government, which will be produced in such a way that it will have the full benefit of government support, will go through. Thank you.
Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Deputy Llywydd. I would like to thank Paul Davies for his continuing efforts to make an Autism Act for Wales a reality. This bill will help deliver what those on the ASD spectrum have been calling for years. Action to improve autism services in Wales. Action that the ASD Action Plan has so far failed to deliver. The Minister has, on a number of occasions, denied that there is any need for this bill, but it is clear that previous strategies and current legislation has done little to improve services for children and adults on the autism spectrum. It should be a matter of national shame that in many parts of Wales there are no clear pathways to the diagnosis of autism, despite the rollout of the Integrated Autism Service. According to a National Autistic Society Cymru survey, around 6 out of 10 people waited more than a year for a diagnosis, and a third nearly 2 years. Paul's bill will place a duty on every single health board to make sure that there is a clear, publicly available pathway to diagnosis. This bill will ensure that staff working in our NHS and the social care sector in Wales are better trained and better equipped to support those on the autism spectrum, and will help put an end to the gaps in these services. People on the spectrum receive services that are either focused on additional learning needs or on mental health provision, and many unfortunately fall between the gaps that exist between our health and education services. It has been over a decade since the publication of the Autism Strategic Action Plan, and very little has changed for those on that spectrum. Successive Welsh Government ministers have systematically failed to deliver any noticeable improvements to autism services in Wales, and yet they are opposed to this bill, saying that legislation is unnecessary. Well, the people that I've helped in my region would not agree with those words. We are a long way past the need for words. It is now time for action. We have all received hundreds of emails from those on the ASD spectrum and their families urging us to support this bill. They know, unfortunately, all too well that warm words are not enough. Wales needs an Autism Act, and it needs it now. I fully support Paul and his bill, and I urge my colleagues from all across the chamber to do likewise. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. We have gone over time, and therefore I apologise to the rest of the people who needed to speak in this important debate. I'm now going to call the member in charge, Paul Davies, to reply to the debate.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I thank everyone who has contributed to this debate this afternoon. Unfortunately, I won't have time to make reference to points made by all members. Can I first of all thank the chairs of the relevant committees for making their positions clear. The chair of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee confirmed that the committee had not reached a consensus on this bill, but the committee is clear we need to see real improvements to services for people with autism. The chair of the Finance Committee has made it clear today the importance of receiving the correct and appropriate information in order to scrutinise legislation, and he expressed the committee's concern that the government had not provided me, as the member in charge, with relevant information, and this has therefore been a barrier in the committee coming to a conclusion. There are certainly lessons to be learnt here as far as the government is concerned. I'm grateful to the Minister for his response to this debate, but I am extremely disappointed that he will vote against this motion today. I know the Minister has tried to argue that the Assembly committees did not positively support this legislation, but the Minister knows full well that the committees were not against this bill either. They made it clear that it's now a matter for this Assembly. The Minister again has argued that the code is superior to this piece of legislation, but of course I disagree with him on that, and I'm not going to rehearse those arguments as I gave these reasons in my opening remarks. However, all I would say to him is that the code could be encompassed into this piece of legislation at stages 2 and 3. So my message to him is this: my bill will build on some of the measures introduced by the Welsh Government. It will complement some of the government's good work, and I therefore urge him and his government to reconsider their position. I'm grateful to Helen Mary Jones for making a powerful argument as to why this bill should be supported, and she's a good example of someone who has been persuaded that legislation is the best way forward. And she's absolutely right that the government is contradicting itself, because yes, on the one hand it argues we don't need condition-specific legislation, but then on the other hand is bringing forward a specific code. It can't have it both ways. I believe this bill will improve service for families living with autism, which affects them each day, all day, every day. The autism community have demonstrated sheer clarity on this issue, and they shared their many stories and experiences with me. So many stories are deeply upsetting, and they are campaigning for legislation to give them protection and assurances for people with autism across Wales. And I would urge members not just to listen to me, listen to the many charities, the which signpost them to services which will help improve their quality of life and the people around them. It is absolutely imperative in defining the difference between what the Welsh Government appear to want and what the autism community want. There's a danger here that the government's measures will allow the government to do of the individuals and their families. I'm sure members will recall the story I told the same. The law would protect a mum we can call Sarah. Her name was changed to protect her identity. I talked about how her child would have meltdowns, how she would lose all control and scratch at her own eyes so that Sarah had to restrain her, and how her brothers didn't understand why their sisters sometimes hit out at them and why their mum wasn't telling her off. Sarah was holding down a job, looking after her family and fighting. And I don't use that term lightly, fighting for a diagnosis. She told me she had to fight for absolutely everything. She shouldn't have to fight. She should have